Good evening. I want to convene the regular meeting of the Brattleboro Selectboard for Tuesday, January 5th, 2018. We know the meeting has been properly warned because we began at 5:15 with committee interviews, and then at 5:30 we went into executive session. The first order of business is to approve the minutes for the May 15th, 2018 meeting. Would someone like to make a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion to approve the minutes of the May 15th meeting. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Under chair's remarks, I just have like three things I want to mention. The first is if you're watching this live and wondering where the ASL interpreters are, we're having an issue with the camera, but the ASL, we do have ASL interpreters here who will be, it's recorded, so if you're watching this on tape, the ASL interpreter, you will be able to see them. And hopefully something's going to come up on the screen explaining that. Second of all, I want to just let everybody know under liquor commissioners this evening, Jack A's Quick Stop has pulled their application until they deal with actually leasing the building and the property or everything. So we won't be discussing that tonight. And on a non-business related note, I want to congratulate the Strolling of the Heifers for another great event. The weather, which was supposed to rain, did not rain. It was wonderful. Thousands of people came to town. So we want to thank everybody at the Stroll for their hard work and highlighting our town to the nation and the world. Town manager's comments.
Thank you. I have just one this evening. The Select Board for the last couple of years has had as one of the annual goals getting a coalition of hub communities started so that we can learn from the other larger communities in the state and share our knowledge with them, and hopefully develop together some legislative agenda where we might get some greater flexibility than what the state currently allows in terms of raising of revenues and other actions for hub towns. And I'm happy to announce we've talked in recent months about the fact that the Vermont League of Cities and Towns was going to help get that rolling. The league has called the first meeting of a hub town committee of the league for June 12th. So just a week from today, we'll be having that first meeting. I'll let you know how that turns out. We'll go from there, working together with our colleagues in the larger towns. That'd be great.
Yep.
We can ride together.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, sounds good.
I'd love to go, but I can't.
And the rest of you like to go.
What's the date of that?
The 12th. It's in the morning, the 12th, up in Hartford.
I might go, I'll see.
Let me know if you do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great news, though.
Thank you. Does anyone on the select board have any committee reports or comments?
I have comments.
Brandy.
We often give remembrance when past board members or other members of our communities pass. And I am sad to say that we had a community member pass this weekend who, his name was Danny Ream. He was manager at Burton's Car Wash for many years. He was a loving and charming human being who many people knew, and those who knew him loved him, and he will be missed greatly. And I wanted to just take a moment to acknowledge that at tonight's meeting.
Thank you. Thank you, Brandy.
I have a couple committee
Yeah,
reports.
David.
The Diversity Equity Committee met again as a follow-up after the visit of 6 students of color from the College of St. Joseph's in Rutland. All around excellent response from the students and from the community people that were involved in the process. They all said that if they were offered employment in Brattleboro, they would be very interested in accepting it. I want to say we, but it's really Diana Wally and Alex Beck who are working with the similar student organization at UVM to try and arrange a similar visit with a lot larger number of students, or maybe a couple of those similar visits in the fall. So that initial activity really sort of set the stage for a series of ideas and opportunities that we're starting to develop. And the Compassionate Communities Committee met and went through a process, a well-led process of identifying goals and and next steps, or basically what they want to be doing, and eliminating a range of ideas, and sort of settling on the general sense that it's time to be engaged in the community and reaching out and starting to work with it outside the committee process and actually trying to develop programs in the community. So that, I think, will be, some flesh will be added to that at the next meeting, and I'll let you know how it's going.
Thank you.
Did you get a report from anybody?
I saw that. Yeah, it came in my inbox. Thank you.
Great.
Does anyone else have any comments or committee reports?
No, because, well, the Traffic Safety Committee didn't meet in the past cycle. We weren't aided.
But we'll be this one.
That's correct.
All right, so you'll have an update soon. Okay, this is the time in the agenda for public participation, and this is the time for people who want to make a comment on something that is not on tonight's agenda. So if anyone would like to speak on something that's not on tonight's agenda, this is the time, and I see Dora. And what I would ask, you know the drill, come to the microphone, tell us who you are and where you're from.
Hi, Dora Bubalis, Church Place. Haven't been here in a while. So I have two things, one of which is entailed and has several pieces to it, so just bear in mind. As we're moving into the new budgetary session, both town and state, I think we, as a town, should be considering the infrastructure needs that are going to be needed for new economic development that's happening down at on Frost Street, because we already know that that intersection at Flat, Frost, and Elm is a concern, has been for a while, and those new businesses that are moving in are going to be much higher impact than the businesses that were existing. Much more vehicular traffic, more delivery vehicles, and way more pedestrian traffic. So anticipating what is already needed anyway and what's going to be more needed when those new businesses come in, start thinking about how to improve that intersection so that it is safer, so that visibility exists from all sides, so that when you are approaching the intersection from the Flat Street side, it doesn't look like somebody's parked in the middle of the street because they have to pull so far out in order to see, so that the visibility coming down from Elliott Street, you can actually see the traffic coming from Flat Street, and doing something so that it reduces the speed coming from Frost Street, because cars go way too fast through there. Also, the visibility off of Church Place isn't great either, and thinking about more vehicles going through there is a concern. I have a few suggestions. One is narrowing that section of Frost Street that is right in front of Turning Point to slow down traffic, and you'd still have plenty of turning radius for the trucks coming into Sursasimo because it's pretty wide. Also, the drainage has been an issue down there for a while. Massive puddle that people who are pedestrians are trying to go around, which is less safe. Part of the reason why that drainage is the way it is because of the way that's designed right there, because there's a dip, but also because of how much runoff is coming from HCRS, because they haven't taken care of the runoff that's coming from all the impervious surface that they've used to pave that that parking lot, which, by the way, should be in their DRB application because it's in every DRB decision that that runoff needs to be taken care of on your own property. Right now, it runs down the sidewalk and it runs into the street and it wears down the sidewalk, and so that's something that needs to be looked at too. As well as forcing them to do plantings, because soil comes down off of that terraced thing and runs down the sidewalk and into that road, making things worse down there. Let's see. If this means buying land from adjacent property owners to do this, this is the time to be thinking about this stuff, because it has to be, we know this is a major thoroughfare, we know it's a detour route, we know it's a major emergency services route. So it's a very well-used route. It's not wide enough, the cutoff isn't wide enough, the buses are going through there. It's not wide enough for people to be walking on it and for cars to come through. Again, something to think about, and I want to bring it to the attention of the board before budget discussions start, while you can get it into the Transportation Committee, and also thinking about bringing it to the state as far as funding and thinking about what they're doing, because we know that this is part of the state purview. So I think that's it on that. Now, just moving on to another issue. I've noticed, because I walk through there all the time, that there are 3 maple trees which have recently been planted in a space next to the firehouse, which shouldn't have any maple trees. The canopies are too big, the root system's going to grow into the buildings and the walls. There's not enough room for maple trees there. I'm not sure who made the decision to put maple trees there, but my suggestion would be dig them up while the root balls are still intact, put them somewhere else, and think about plantings that make sense over there. Because you've got them right on top of the emergency generator. So 5 to 10 years from now, we're going to have branches in a storm falling on the emergency generator. Doesn't really make sense. The one tree in particular is both too close to the wall where the side road goes up and the building. We're going to have roots going into foundations of a building that we already spent way too much money on in the first place. Let's sort of think ahead and anticipate. And again, I'm not sure who made the decision to do that, but we should look at it now before it becomes a problem, because we don't want to have to be looking at this 5 years from now and saying, oh, we have this issue. Let's take care of it now.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dora.
Peter's been making notes, so I think there's going to be follow-up to everything you just said. Is there anyone else in the public who would like to make a comment on something that's not on tonight's agenda? Yes, Franz.
Good evening. Franz Reichsman from the Finance Committee. Something that I guess was relevant earlier this evening and often is relevant is executive session and the criteria for executive session. It's something we've talked about in the Finance Committee recently, and we're looking for a little more clarity on. We understand that there are criteria in the law of when you can discuss things in private, in particular things like contracts. Our interest in it is that a lot of the expenses in the general budget relate to contracts either with unionized or non-unionized employees, and the discussion of those things tends to take place in executive session because they are contracts. My understanding of the open meeting law, however, is that it's not sufficient to just have a contractual matter under discussion, but rather premature revelation of the discussion would hurt somebody somehow, either the town or an individual. Yeah. And what we don't know is how that is considered and what the process is for deciding that this information is sensitive enough to require executive session versus maybe some other contractual discussions that are not. So I'm not making any specific suggestion at this point, just that our committee has been interested in hearing more about this at some time, and maybe the general public would be interested as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it might be something that we can just like fill people in on. We do make a motion, obviously, before we go into executive session. I sort of know it by heart now, premature general public knowledge. That explains in general, obviously, what we're going in for, whether it's tonight we went into for contracts, pending or probable civil litigation, the appointment or employment of an evaluation of a public employee. So we give the general thing, and obviously we can't go into specifics, but maybe we can have a discussion where we talk about the open meeting law and how we do things. I don't know if that would satisfy.
Well, this is just to put it on the table as something that's of concern to us and perhaps others. Yeah. And I didn't mean to claim that you were lawbreakers.
Oh no, I I didn't think you were.
I just think you're looking for metrics on what qualifies.
Yeah, just how does it work? That's all.
Yep.
That makes sense.
So if I could offer two things on that. One is a quick clarification about the specific kinds of contracts that you mentioned in your comments, and then the other is an offer. So let me offer first. If you'd like to sit down with me, or if you'd like to sit down with Bob Fisher, either or both of us would be happy to do that and talk about our understanding of the law and how we try to travel under that with the select board. And, if that's helpful to you for the finance committee, that's great. If we need something more than that, we we'll go wherever we need to go with you on that. As to the specific point about contracts with employee labor unions, there's a separate category under the state law about that's not just contracts. There is a contracts sort of overarching category, but there's also labor relations agreements with employees is a separate item that is allowed as a reason to go into executive session. And on that particular one, so what I would say is that on other contracts more broadly, sometimes we go into executive session if there is something that is particularly sensitive about that the board needs to discuss privately before discussing it publicly. We always do that when it is labor relations agreements with employees because of other aspects, not issues related to the public meetings law, but issues related to the labor relations laws about the benefits of both the unions and the town being able to exchange ideas freely in private before coming to the meeting of the minds that is ultimately brought out in public. So that you probably won't see a change on, but we can reflect and discuss where we draw that line, where it's more of a judgment call related to which contracts that are not labor contracts are discussed privately and which ones are publicly.
Well, if all of Part 2 could be included in your offer in Part 1, that would be great.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And I think I just want to say one thing for people who are watching. We don't take any votes in executive session. So if we ever vote on anything, we come out and we vote on it. So and I know you know that. I just want to make sure the general public understands that we're not making, we're not taking votes and voting on contracts and anything behind closed doors. But I'm glad you said what you said. So thank you. Does anyone else want to make a comment on something that's not on tonight's agenda? All right, seeing none. As I said earlier, we're not going to convene as liquor commissioners because that application has been pulled for now. So our first order of business is unfinished business, and it's the solid waste budget. And for anybody who was tuned in, we know that at our last meeting, we went over the solid waste budget and were given an opportunity to ask questions. And I think there was a memo that we received from Patrick explaining there was a slight change because of a mistake in how much we pay for tonnage, correct?
Yes.
But it changes it by about $5,000.
Yeah, the budget presented here is materially the same as the one that was presented to the board at your last meeting on May 15th. It's down by about $5,000, which is fairly minor. We had incorrectly calculated the tip fee for solid waste tonnage. That's been corrected. And so the budget remains largely the same.
Yep. And so what you're asking for tonight is for us, if we're ready, to approve the FY19 budget as well as approve a transfer of $105,000 from the general fund to the solid waste fund.
Correct.
Those are the two things. Yes.
And may I just speak briefly to the connection between those two? So as we've indicated to the board in the prior consideration of this particular budget this year, we've realized now that we're experiencing for the second year in a row the need to make a substantial transfer at the end of the fiscal year from the general fund to the solid waste fund because of, in this year's case, some additional costs related to recycling processing in conjunction with lower bag sales than were predicted. Last year it was exclusively because of the lower bag sales, which is actually a good thing. is it means that people are recycling more and composting more and throwing away less garbage. But nevertheless, what has caused us to be in a position where we're out of sync and needing to come to you at this time of year asking for an additional transfer is the fact that traditionally this budget was prepared at the time of the utility budget and the parking budget separate from the general fund. We can cure this problem and not have to come back for supplemental transfers if we do the solid waste budgeting at the same time as the general fund budget, so that we get those two in sync with each other and we have a proper, sufficient transfer budgeted in the general fund budget that goes to town meeting. So while we're asking you tonight for a $105,000 transfer, and we can assure you that there will be sufficient funds, barring some major emergency in the next 3 weeks, we will end the fiscal year with sufficient funds so that this $105,000 won't affect won't cause the town to be in deficit or anything like that. It should be the last time that we ask you to make a transfer of this type. Tonight, it's necessary because of the deficit condition in the solid waste fund.
But from now on, this budget will be included in the general.
We'll present both at the same time so that the transfer from one to the other is calculated at the appropriate time for the two budgets to match up right.
Okay.
Yep.
That makes sense to everybody?
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
And just for people watching, it's an $837,000 solid waste budget. That's what we're talking about.
Yep.
Does anyone on the board have any comments or questions?
Well, my only concern and question, as bringing it back to what I raised before, is looking at the impact to all of our citizens. And as we are moving in the direction of trying to be better to the environment, I also want to make sure it's also in tandem to being better to ourselves. And so if there's any way to think creatively, maybe not spending more money for a full out expensive assessment, but maybe, I don't know, working with one of the local high schools or working with college students who are working around sustainability and environmental issues, if we can continue to be thinking of ways to look into how these things are impacting people as we're going forward. That's the only thing that I want to mark, because I think that's very important and very key as we're looking at how to make us a cleaner, better town. And I'd be interested in trying to figure out how we further explore that and do it in creative, cost-effective ways.
Now, do you mean impact them financially, or are we talking bag prices and things like that?
Financially, seeing if, for example, the recycling, if people are understanding it, if there's a, more education that needs to happen. So as, let's say, I'm just throwing this out there, let's say there is a college course locally at one of the local colleges where they're looking into these issues, and this could be someone's project. While they're going through and collecting the information, could it also be an opportunity to look at creative ways? Someone I live in an apartment, I don't have space for a lot of the recycling. I have to be very creative about how I do that. And so I'm just looking at, as we're, like I said, being better to our environment, how do we also bring everyone along, anyone who's living in the trailer parks, anyone who's a renter, everyone doesn't have, expansive space for keeping up with everything, and also including the issue of bags and how that's impacting everybody. So I just want to continue to explore that.
Yep, I agree with Shanta, because we've said at this very table, we've acknowledged the fact that it puts a higher burden on lower income families. While we're on the topic of irritations with the process, the other thing that really irritates me is the fact that we have to resell the compost back to the public. I think it would be a great incentive to get people excited about curbside composting if we say, you bring your stuff to the curb, we process it, we have it all year, and then you get to come and have, I know there's a window in March sometimes where you can come and get a bucket, but I'm not sure as a gardener that that's a great time to do it, because if there's still 3 feet of snow on the ground, where are you storing your free bucket of compost that you might have got? And also, I just think it doesn't feel as good to have to resell it to the community. Here we are already being punitive with the fact that people have to buy these bags, and then it feels like we're taking some wind out of people's sails and out of our own sails when we're saying, yay, you made compost. Now you can go and buy it if you want to.
Is there a reason we charge? There's a charge?
It's
The
not-
compost
Sold
decision
out.
is made at the solid
So-
waste
Okay.
management
Oh,
district.
so we can ask our representatives of the solid waste district.
Yeah.
Correct.
Who was that again?
Yeah, the reason we can't give it away is because the compost is not ours. The compost is owned by the district.
But isn't it created by our taxpayers?
Absolutely.
That's interesting.
And others.
I have
Well,
feelings.
and others,
I
yeah,
have feelings.
absolutely. So, there are a couple of reasons why you would compost. One of which is obviously it's good for the earth. It's a productive thing to do with food waste. But secondarily, it is less expensive to divert food waste into a compost program than it is to throw it away.
Right.
So the benefits that the town receives by virtue of the program are twofold. It reduces our overall costs on disposing of solid waste and does a good thing for the planet at the same time.
I
It
hear
also
you.
generates revenue that reduces the amount of money that we have to charge for our sewers. for the,
And it's free
management.
to the user.
But
What
if the
the
user
compost
wants to go
system is.
get compost for their garden, they have to buy it when they've contributed that very compost.
Well, you can make your own compost pile.
Some people can.
I mean,
Listen, I'm
If
just
you-
throwing it
I'm
out
sorry,
there.
if
Like,
you
I'm
have
not
a
going to be
garden,
swayed at
you're
this
gonna
table.
have-
Right.
if you have a garden.
Maybe.
Okay. Anyway, go right ahead with your discussion.
I'll just ask Patrick to bring it up at the
I would like that.
Waste District Board meeting.
That's considered a source of revenue for the district for
Well,
sure.
Yeah,
Well, I'm sure.
And if they don't have the revenue, they're going to pass it along to us, I'm assuming.
and we pay more.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a,
I'm not done with it. I'm done with it for the second, but I'm not done with my feelings.
all right, does anyone else on the board have any comments or questions about the solid waste budget?
I have a comment.
Yeah.
It seems to make sense to me to incorporate it into the general fund budget. So I don't think we need to discuss that
That's what I thought we
immediately.
were doing. Yeah.
No.
Before the second.
What's that?
I think I had assumed that before reading this memo, that that's what we were doing.
So,
Yeah, for 2020.
may I clarify?
I think what we're doing, and
Go ahead.
is discussing when it's going to be presented and decided upon.
Right.
Not necessarily that we're going to fold it into the general fund.
Yeah.
budget.
I also wanted to fold it in,
Okay.
and John O'Connor made a compelling argument for why we should keep it separate because of our reporting obligation to show how the costs and the revenues of the solid waste fund fully defray under the state statute that requires us to, there's a term for this.
So
There was a
what
term
you're
of
referring
art
to is
for
that,
the.
I don't know what the artful term is, but the cost, the revenue rather, generated by the sale of bags needs to cover the cost of collection and disposal of solid waste. And so unless we sort of separate them out this way, it'll be difficult for us to be able to validate that we have properly calibrated the price of the bags.
There was
Makes
a
sense.
term of art in the law, and I apologize, I don't remember it, but basically the intent of that legislation was to make people feel the cost of throwing away garbage and therefore be encouraged to recycle and compost. And so we need to show it separately. I don't know that we absolutely have to have it be a separate fund. I can look into that further with John, but that's why we've talked about doing the two things simultaneously rather than making this just, another program within the general fund.
Yeah, to clarify, I didn't want it to not be shown separately.
Okay.
I just thought folding it in would seem.
Yeah, that's where we first were headed. And like I said, we've had that discussion at staff. We'll have some more discussion at staff and we'll address it further with you in the fall.
Yeah, because the plan is to do this for the 2020 budget.
Yes,
Right.
exactly, yes.
Anyone else on the board have any comments or questions? Anyone in the public have any comments or questions? Dora?
Hi, Dora Bubalis, Church Place. Some of you at least know that I served on the Solid Waste District Board for the duration of my being on the Select Board for 5 years, and then even after that, so I guess about 6 or 7 years. just to go back to the compost issue, obviously there's a labor cost. The solid waste district is a public district that is funded by taxpayer money. So either the town pays for it up front or the town pays for it on the back, but somebody's going to pay for that labor cost that goes in, an operational cost that goes into the composting. It's not just that the compost gets dumped in a pile and it sits there. They're processing it and doing all sorts of things to it to get it to the point when you can use it in your garden. So even though it's a less entailed, labor-intensive thing than, say, recycling processing, it still has a cost. So I think looking at that and trying to figure out, like, the cost-benefit analysis of that. Going back to the bags. Originally, when the decision to go to pay-as-you-throw was made, it was extensively sort of said that the bags were going to cover the cost of the waste. And that's been an issue all along. Each year, it keeps increasing the amount that has to be added to be able to do an addition to the bags. Part of the issue is people are trying to recycle things that are not recyclable. And then it ends up in the transfer station, and the transfer station is probably taking that stuff that's not recyclable and putting it in the trash and adding it to whatever tipping fees might be. More education has to be done because people are putting things in the recycle bins that should go in the compost bins. People are composting things that shouldn't be composted. Where also the volatility of the recycling market makes it so that a lot of the things that are going in the recycle bin, just because it has a number and a little recycle symbol on the bottom of it, does not mean that it's getting recycled. A lot of stuff isn't. It's ending up in the trash on the other end, which then increases your recycling fees on that end. So I think looking at this sort of as a larger, and I think it's time to start working with the state, the Agency of Natural Resources, the committee that deals with the solid waste statute in the state, because I think this is going to be a statewide issue. And one more thing I want to suggest is this is something that I'm going to bring to the committee, but I think that coming from the select board, it would be a big deal since we were the first town to do compost collection. Takeout containers are a major deal. They're one of the major sources of trash. And most of takeout containers, even if they're supposedly recyclable, are not. Those black bottoms to those plastic containers that come from the Chinese takeout food are not recyclable. They're not getting recycled. So, because it's just such a low order. And I also think we have to look at back to what Shanta was saying about the issues of sustainability. Just because it's plastic doesn't mean that it should be recycled. It's a highly toxic process. The higher the number, the more toxic it is. It's not just that they melt it down and make something else. It's an extremely toxic process. So I would suggest working on the state statute to make all takeout containers in the state compostable. Let's get rid of styrofoam. Let's get rid of plastic, because the volatility in the market says that just because the plastic is supposed to be recyclable, it won't. So all takeout containers, all silverware, compostable. On the other end, then education has to happen. What should go in the compost? What should go in recycling? What should go in trash? And that's still a work in progress. I know at least a few older people who insist on throwing tissues in the recycle bin because it's paper. And I can laugh about that, but that actually contaminates the entire batch of recycling. So because that's another thing. So the more trash, the more garbage, the more crap goes into that recycle bin, goes into the compost, it's contaminated. So education, working with the state, The laws need to be changed. We did this whole bag ordinance, and, that's a step in the right direction, but that's actually low-hanging fruit compared to takeout containers.
Okay, anyone else in the public have any comments on the solid waste budget? All right, we're being asked to consider approving the FY19 solid waste budget as presented, and also to approve a transfer of $105,000 from the general fund to the solid waste fund. What would the select board like to do?
I move we approve the FY19 solid waste budget as presented.
We have a motion to approve the FY19 solid waste budget as presented. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the transfer of $105,000 from the general fund to the solid waste fund?
So moved.
We have a motion to approve the transfer of $105,000 from the general fund to the solid waste fund. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? That motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Next up is the downtown parking. And we have three things that we want to talk about tonight. At last select board meeting, we had a conversation about the parking study that the town contracted a consultant to do. And out of that, we asked for updates on parking meters, because we want to talk about getting them non-change as much as possible, a discussion about the parking system, and hopefully the approval, if not tonight, at the next meeting of the FY19 parking budget. So I don't know if we want to talk about the parking meter first, and I know Patrick did a terrific memo,
Well, thank you.
and if you'd like to tell us about it.
Sure. So this particular element is just a follow-up from the discussion of 3 weeks ago. As the board and the public may recall, staff presented a plan for a transition to the use of smart meters in the downtown. In anticipation, staff has been working on that for several months in anticipation of a recommendation that would ultimately come from the parking study. Parking study did in fact have that recommendation, and so staff was prepared and made a recommendation to the board about a plan for how to move forward with that relatively quickly, and given the comparative lack of financial resources to do so, we had proposed a plan whereby we would borrow money from the utility fund, pay it back over a couple of years, and make a transition to the use of smart meters. It's a good option. It's still available to us, but there were some other options that were discussed, and one of them was proposed by Stephanie Bonin at the Downtown Brattleboro Alliance, and I think it was worthy of some consideration, and that was the use of what's called a smart parking app, which is a little application that goes on your smartphone, and it enables the user to be able to purchase parking through the use of that app, and to provide for a means with which the parking public can pay for parking without coinage. The other additional benefit that this type of program would provide is that there's virtually no upfront, not even virtually, there's no upfront cost to the town. And so in the intervening weeks, sat down, met with Stephanie, we took a look at the program. I spoke with some representatives who sell the service, contacted a number of towns that utilize the service, and was actually pleasantly surprised with what they said. They're very supportive of the app program, and in fact, the places that I spoke to that had instituted its use haven't since added smart parking meters. So they found it to be a sort of complete solution that addressed the needs of the public and addressed the needs of the municipality. So I think that's another reasonable way forward if the board was inclined to take that option. The nice thing about it, if we were to move forward with a smart parking app program instead of a smart meter program, is that we can always decide in some future year that, this just isn't a decent enough solution. We'd like to pursue those meters now, and we can do that at a later date. So I'm interested to hear the board's reaction and consideration. I think there's a couple of different viable options here, pursuing the smart meters or pursuing the smart app. And how does that sit with you?
Brandy just said something in my ear, and I was going to say something that led. Brandy goes, "Why is it or?" The one concern.
I had the same question too.
Yeah, the one concern I'm going to bring up about the app, and I just for people in the TV land that don't know, I work at the Chamber of Commerce, and our office is right down the street. So anytime someone has a complaint or wants to say something, we hear about it. And I have not kept track of numbers, so I don't know. We have people come into our chamber complaining that they get no cell service downtown. Some people have AT&T and it doesn't work. Some people have T-Mobile. So that's just one concern I have about relying solely on the app. And again, I don't have the stats on how many people have done it because I never really thought it was, I was going to be dealing with an app. So.
Well, I was gonna, so I work remotely a lot, and I've been working remotely in telecommuting for many years. Downtown, it's spotty, so I have several issues with primarily app, and I had also the same questions of why is it either or. This is under the overarching theme of we wanna do this right, or at least my idea and goal would be to do this right so we could avert future costs and frustration, but also staying efficient and also going back to the question of who's Brattleboro for. So for example, my mother-in-law is 88 years old. She has no cell phone. She refuses to get online, and that's okay. I respect her right. But when she comes and parks downtown, she's not going to be able to access the app. The other thing is not everybody has a smartphone. So that's my other issue alongside the cell signal, or let's say you just ran and, got into your car and you didn't charge up your phone, or your phone is dead, or you don't have the right data package to be able to support the app. Or another example I have is being in New Haven and trying to download Uber onto my phone and having trouble with that in order to get an Uber. And so the questions of does everybody have to have a smartphone? Everybody doesn't have a smartphone. I've worked with a lot of people here who just don't, or the signal issue. And I personally feel strongly that we should approach this very carefully, but also in a timely fashion. And I don't see it as an either or. Like there was something mentioned about testing, either it was the kiosk or the smart meters. And I don't see why we wouldn't be able to test those things out. And if we were so compelled to try the app, maybe try that as well and get some good data to see what would work. But I'm strongly against anything that would require people to have an app, because not everybody has the ability to get an app on their phone.
I think Tim wants to.
I don't think anyone is suggesting we're going to take away meters with coins.
Okay.
Right.
Want to take away what?
I think
Meters with coins, which is what we have now.
I think my thing is I would like, frankly, both. I want to do the app. I think the app is a great idea for the people who want to use an app. I could have used it the other day when I got a ticket because a meeting that I was in ran over and there was no clock because the office was closed and we were in some weird room. I was like, so yeah, I mean, frankly, I want to see the meter head switched out to take cards, and I would love to see the marketing of an app because I think that's a great idea simultaneously, and with no ignoring of the kiosks in the long-term lots.
Yeah, because that's the next thing.
Unfortunately, I'm that person, and I want all three at the same time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I just want to make it unequivocally clear that it is not an either-or proposition.
Okay.
It can be a both
Good.
and.
Okay.
No problem.
The word
That
or
we're just
was-
seeking the direction of the board.
Yeah, I was just, I do apologize for my ignorance. I was just a bit confused because I was hoping that it wasn't something that we were going to choose one choice that would then leave out a lot of a population. So, thank you for that clarification.
So the question I have, I would, I don't see any reason to not, I mean, there are problems with some people not being able to use the app, but there's no cost, very little cost to us to do that, and it will be convenient for a large percentage of the population, so I don't see any reason not to just go ahead with that. And I would love to see us change out the heads as well. It's $83,000. And I think I would like to see us update at least 4 of the kiosks, 2 in the
God, yes.
transportation center and 1 in each of the other lots, which is another $48,000. So we're at $125,000. And we are looking at a $40,000 surplus per year. So do we want to take 3 years to do that, or do we talked last time about borrowing either from ourselves or
Right.
or somebody else and doing it quickly. And I mean, I prefer we borrow from ourselves, but you guys can figure that out. John will figure that out for us. But I think we should do at least that much, and we should just do it now.
Now, with the pay and display things, am I dreaming that we might be able to do some pilot project with that, or am I making that
There was a
up?
3-month trial.
Yeah, there's a trial.
Couple of things. Peter was absolutely right. There's no need for these 2 programs, let's say, to be exclusive of each other. They can both be accomplished. What staff had proposed a couple of weeks back at the May 15th meeting was to do an immediate transition of the single space meters and then to gather some data working with a vendor in the kiosks to determine if the prices were sufficient to pay back the cost of the transition of the kiosks with the increased revenue which would be gathered. We just don't know that. And so what we proposed was a couple of month trial period in which we'd gather some data. If the data is nothing we're concerned about, and in fact, we just want to swap out the kiosks because that's what we want to do, then staff can come back with a program that would, detail how we could make that transition. Obviously, it would be a greater cost. There'd be the 83 for the meters, and we'd put together a plan for the kiosks as well. It may be the case that moving forward in the parking fund next year, we may need to look at a rate increase in order to keep that fund from going negative or not generating the 40,000 that we've been regularly doing. But if what's important to the board is to make this transition, to make it quickly and completely, I think we can come back and bring that type of proposal.
That's important to me.
I think if we, go ahead, Peter.
I just want to say yes, absolutely to all of that. And the only asterisk I would put on it is just the one that's going to require a little further study. So we'll be very explicit about this when we come back to you. I think that the numbers that you were talking about a few minutes ago, Dave, in the 125 range, going from 83 to 125 still keeps us in the range of numbers where we could borrow from ourselves. Depending on the total figures, once we look at this, if we're going to move from the older technology to the smart meters and smart kiosks in one jump, that may rise to a price that our advice to you will be to actually go out to borrow the money rather than to draw down that much money from the utility fund. But we don't know. So I just wanted to make sure you know that's an unknown part of this, but we're hearing loud and clear that you'd like to move forward more aggressively to change out the system. And we can bring that information back to you.
I think that doing it piecemeal is, if we want to, we've got the study, we know what needs to happen. And we didn't get to the bikes yet, which we're not going on until we do. But it just makes sense to do it all. When people start finding out that they drive up to the kiosk and actually it works, which isn't always the case, and it's raining and they can actually get $1 in there, it's not wet, and or they can stick their credit card in, people can feel a lot differently about coming downtown. Which means, and even though we don't have yet, Tim's going to get us one, we don't have a local option sales tax yet so that we would generate revenue from the tax and the money that they spend downtown. We do have the rooms and meals tax, so if they come for lunch, more people come for lunch, we'll generate some income. But it's just gonna make it a lot more convenient to come downtown.
I have 2 questions. Maybe this was answered last time, but I'm not sure, are we asking or looking at the whole idea of dual purpose spaces? I'm not sure that's the proper name for it, but the parking or looking at where business is closed and it's night.
Oh, yeah.
And then were we going to be exploring that at some point as well? And then there was my because that would be great, but also the next question, because I got something from one of the merchants in terms of the money, like where does the parking fund, like money that's generated from it, go towards? I think the thing she brought up was, for example, could it go towards the train station? Could it go towards?
Oh, yeah, I got that too.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's just a clarifying question about where the funds go towards.
Can I answer the first thing when we talked
Sure.
about like dual, like taking
Yeah,
some of the parking study?
absolutely.
Because I think when we talked about, there's a deadline for us to vote on the budget.
Yeah.
So what we thought we would do, if this still sounds what we want to do, is deal with the budget either at this meeting or the next, but then work diligently to go through some of the recommendations of the parking study, about what you just talked about, using business space at night, or Brandy wants where we put more bike parking, and look at some of the ordinances.
Yeah.
Because and they're all in here, some of the ordinances. So we're not just doing the budget and check. We won't talk about it again until next year. It's like, let's just systematically, talk about this stuff, if that makes sense.
No, it totally makes sense doing it
Yeah.
in phases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that way
think
we can, tackle this stuff once and for all, and not just go
Absolutely.
like, next time we'll do it.
Right.
I think that, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, we should look at every one of those and include the train station, all that, but I think that there are at least 5 things that I've got circles around that I think we all agree on and can say to the staff we want you to move forward on. And one is the apps, the new credit card heads, at least 4 of the kiosks, and then the funding around all of that. And then I would think kind of quickly look at the private lots thing, and that seems like really low-hanging fruit for more parking capacity, particularly at night. Although it's not, it's staff time, and obviously you can't do all these things at once. And the other is identifying a couple of spaces between High Street and Flat Street where we could put a couple of bike racks and just put them in with the 10 grand that we got left over after we do whatever we're going to do with the 46. I forget what it was. The staircase in the transportation center.
I think you're incorrect on the, that we're all on board with the cards if we're first trying the app, isn't that?
No.
We decided we
both.
want to do it.
We want to do it all.
We want to do
do it all.
both.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the app is pretty much free, is that correct? So if we get the smart meters and then add the app, we'll have coins, credit card, and app.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Does that make
I
sense?
thought people,
You
I
can
thought
take
staff was
your money
moving
any way you
towards-
can get it to us.
Well, they wanted the recommendation was the app until we've all just expressed our concerns
Right.
over it.
So we're still pro app, but
Well,
we're
you might
pro
not have
debit
expressed
card
a
too.
concern.
Wait a minute. There were concerns, but then didn't we just say that it doesn't rule out using coins? But what you're saying is that we're in agreement that we should definitely go with a card system
Well,
as well?
there would be, I think the app, and correct me if I'm wrong, is we keep the meters that we have now and just put the app on it. So people would only have
Right.
coins and
Right.
app and not credit card.
Wouldn't have further benefit outside of what we already have.
Correct, we're in
Consider-
agreement on that point.
Not good
But then
enough.
are you taking the next step and saying we're all in agreement on definitely doing cards
Well,
with
we can-
new meters?
We
have
should
to-
vote on it. We haven't voted on it.
Yeah, we haven't
Yeah.
voted on it.
Let's just-
I
since
thought
you
that-
included that.
I hadn't heard
think-
from you on that. I'd heard
was
from other
pumping the
people.
brakes a little bit.
I think
probably
4 of us
four of
Okay.
us
are for.
Okay, that's what I'm hearing. May I
Fresh air.
clarify something? I think we teed this up tonight in a way that started out confusing, and I apologize for that, because we had brought forward the recommendation on the smart meters. During the last time the discussion came up about the app, we took a look at that in the meantime and said, gee, that's a great idea, because not only does that add some modern technology and convenience, but it does it for free. So we've got a supplemental memo in here where we've said, that'd be a really good thing, and we can do it for free. And you can do the meters later, smart meters later, if you want to do the app now and the smart meters later.
Okay.
What we heard in the initial discussion was that was being interpreted as we were asking you to pick. we're not asking you to pick. We're asking you to give us direction of whether you want to do one or the other or both, or do you need additional information? And back to the whether you're all on the same page or not, the four of you have spoken really clearly and enthusiastically this evening for the idea of doing both. Not only both, but actually extending the smart meters piece to include the kiosks.
Okay.
So app, smart meters, and smart kiosks
Got it.
Does that make sense?
is what we're hearing. But you haven't voted yet.
Yeah.
I was a little bit sold on the idea of going with the app, definitely seeing how that went, and then seeing if it made it so successful that we weren't needing to add smart meters and spend the $83,000.
I was too, because in Patrick's memo, he talked to some towns that went with the app and said, are you going to put new heads in? And they
So
said,
that's
no.
why the new memo.
Why bother? Yeah.
But
confused me a
the
little
problem
bit.
is, what towns did you talk to? I mean, we live in a town with spotty cell service, even downtown. I mean, that's
one
what
and
I'm
only
concerned
Brattleboro.
about.
So I just have to say, I've
Yeah.
never had a problem with cell service.
I have had
Yeah.
clients, I've had problems, like
Yeah.
T-Mobile drops before you
by
get
the
into
hospital.
town.
Yeah, no, we have people come into the chamber all
Yeah.
the time and scream at us, going, cell phone doesn't work, you know? So, but again, I don't want to say how many people come and scream at us, because I don't,
Yeah, and we're
Take
not
stat.
against the app, I'm pro app.
yeah, I'm pro app too. But if it's our only source, I just worry about that. I mean, if it's our only new thing.
It's our
besides
only upgrade.
Yeah, if
Other
it's our
than
only
money, yeah.
upgrade, I worry about that.
Okay.
Just because it might frustrate people
Yeah.
more than
Than
they're already
having
frustrated.
wet dollars.
I had a
Yeah.
couple questions. I feel like we're just rolling forward, and I have two simple questions.
Mm-hmm.
I think you could answer. We are considering that there will be costs, maybe hidden costs with signage, public education, things like that, or is that something that the app will provide on their end? Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, the app firm would provide that.
Okay, so, because it could be quite a bit of,
Oh, there'd be
Stickers or
boatloads of
signs.
signage.
Okay.
Because you would need to have direction as to, otherwise you don't know to use your cell phone, so.
it's not a situation where they send you PDFs and say, make
Go for it.
signs.
No, actually, it's just part of the service,
Yeah.
so.
Thank you. And then, how about, does it notify you when your parking is going to be
Yeah,
up?
when you're,
Yeah.
if in fact there is still allowable time for you to purchase, it would notify you, letting you know that, you want to
Yeah.
keep going a little bit.
And you
But
can-
there are overall limits to how long you can stay in any one individual space.
When it notifies you, you don't have to run back outside.
I know, it's wonderful for the
Yeah.
end user. Possibly would impact our bottom line.
And you can use your GPS to find your car once it's towed.
Really?
No, there
It's-
might be an impact on revenue, is all I'm saying.
Oh, absolutely, there will be. I think
In a good
it's
way or a bad
reasonable to
way.
expect the salesmen kind of tell you it's going to be here, and, I tend to be a little cautious and conservative about it, but every community that I've spoken with that's made a transition to either smart meters and/or use the parking app has noticed some increased revenue, generally between 10 and 15%.
And they don't lose revenue because they're losing the parking ticket fee?
No, there's a strange thing in human psychology where if you're standing at a parking meter and you're fishing around in your pockets for coinage, you are going to be more protective, right? I think I can get by with just a dime, or maybe I can get by with just 1/4. But for some reason, when it's just a swipe of a thumb, you have a tendency to just say, well, max it out and I won't get a ticket and that'll be good.
Point of order, Madam Chairman, I think with this kind of free-form discussion, there is no moderator to recognize people.
What
We
we do, Kurt, is we talk amongst ourselves as the select board, and then I ask for public comment. So we haven't forgotten you.
I'm not looking to speak, I see someone else raising
I know,
their
but
hand.
we're gonna have our discussion, and then we're gonna go to the
You see her.
public.
Thank you.
So you're saying that both the app and the credit card situation might produce the same revenue bump. I think what I was trying to say is that possibly the app itself in notifying you might decrease
Right.
a little bit of the revenue.
In that it would reduce citation income?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay?
Now, before anybody makes me out to be the ogre of the room, I just want to remind everybody that this revenue helps us pay for all of these things that the taxpayers don't want to pay for.
Absolutely. And that's a point that's always worth making again and again and again.
Thank you.
That all of the
He will.
revenue from the parking fund, which is derived either from meters, the coins that get dropped into meters, or from the paying of citations, goes to paying for parking enforcement and for maintaining the infrastructure in the parking system, which includes a whole series of surface lots, includes all the pay boxes, all the meter heads, all the electric vehicle chargers, the Brattleboro Transportation Center, the parking garage. All of that is maintained through this particular set of revenues. And the virtue of that is that it keeps those expenses from having to be borne by the property taxpayers.
So Shanta, there's your answer.
Right, and I was about
Well,
to say-
that's perfect, and I do have another point to raise, is that one of the things that became totally clear, partially clear with the parking study, is the idea that it's a perception issue based on where people wanted to park. So what I would offer or wonder about is just thinking about how we're rolling this out and communicating this to the public, so that if, let's say, we only do 2 out of 4 of the kiosks, or however many you suggested, along with that, along with the credit card head meters, that we also are communicating to public, almost like a whole full rollout to say, and remember, here are all the other places where you could be parking.
And
where you
remember,
could
the
find-
lots are cheaper.
No, well, right, like
Stop parking on the street.
I think it's really key to remind people where there are options, because it was a shock to me, like, wow, oh wow, there's a lot more parking than is perceived. So if we're doing that at the same time, I think also that would be very important and key.
And there is, and it needs updating, but the town has a really nice parking brochure on like where to park, and maybe doing something similar to that. 'Cause
I've never seen it.
So
sounds
we have
fancy.
but
Go to the chamber.
Yeah.
how much it costs has changed, but it's really, in theory, it's a nice.
The
It's a
planning
nice
commission, the planning commission memo that we got recommended that we budget a marketing campaign as well as signage.
Yeah, yeah,
So-
yeah.
Put that in the loan application too.
There's $1,000 in the proposed budget for marketing, and if it's gonna cost, a bit more than that, then we can deal with that as we roll the thing out. There'll be other costs.
I was about to say, we share it. We'll share it on social media.
Yeah, not like $1,000's gonna be fine.
Now,
Sounds good.
can I just ask one question, and then we're going to go to the public, don't worry. The things that we've talked about, the meter, the smart meters, the app, and the kiosk, is that included in the budget documents we're being asked to support tonight? Or we're going to carry this over to the next meeting?
So you can do either. I'm not sure, actually, and I'll look to Patrick because he's been doing the work on this. I don't know that with the questions that have been raised tonight, that even 2 weeks from tonight, we'd be in a position to lay it out for you in a way that is going to be, make the capital budget piece of this really accurately reflect where you're going to land when you've got the fullness of the information you need from us. And what I would say is that while ideally we like to plan, budget, and execute, and so it would be good, it would be better if the list of capital projects matched up with the ones that we're actually going to go forward and implement this year. In the parking budget, it isn't essential the way it is with the general fund. With the general fund, the transfer to the capital fund, and then the projects and the equipment that are authorized in the capital fund have to both be approved by representative town meeting, and it has to all be explicitly clear. In this case, the pot of money you're drawing off of is the parking fund. And the budget doesn't reflect a transfer to a capital fund that needs to be in a sufficient amount to carry certain projects forward. It just talks about what the operating expenses of the fund are going to be, and we know that the balance, the net revenue, is what's available to be able to do some capital work with. The conversation, both leading up to tonight and tonight, has been that we all expect that the town is going to borrow in order to implement these changes, whether we borrow from ourselves or whether we borrow from a bank. We're going to be not able to carry the implementation of the capital work with the currently available funds. So the bottom line of all that is I believe you're in a position where you could approve the budget as it's been presented, with an explicit acknowledgement that over the weeks ahead, maybe even the months ahead, we're going to be working through a process together to where you'll ultimately end up with enough information in front of you to make the capital decisions, both what we're going to buy and how we're going to pay for it.
So this
If
is
you'd
part
rather
one.
wait 2 weeks and see if we have something more substantive to bring you on the capital, we can, but I don't think it's going to get you all the way home.
So the proposed budget
Yes,
is this thing we're looking at, page 1 and 2.
that is
in our
correct.
packet.
That is correct. And you have a 2-page memo.
But in it has meter income smart, okay. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page on what we want. You know what I mean? And it doesn't get lost in translation somewhere.
Let me make clear that the meter income smart card is referring to the
Yeah,
the
the
current
current,
smart
yeah.
card. So this is
Right.
all about what's before you in the
Right.
2-page budget is all about our current system.
Right.
Before we go forward with implementing the capital improvements that
Right.
you'd like to implement.
And the expenses, you're saying would be all capital expenses, so it wouldn't be included in this
I'm saying
budget anyway?
that's correct.
Okay.
The upgrade for, there won't be a cost for the app, and the upgrade for the smart meters and smart kiosks will be capital expenses, not
And
reflected.
we
in
can
this.
approve them separately.
Sure, because the reason you have to approve the capital, the major capital stuff that's not in these funds, along with the general fund, is so that it calibrates the general fund transfer to the capital fund correctly.
Right.
And so that both of those that are within the purview of representative town meeting can be approved by representative town meeting.
Right.
Since this one is yours, and this budget isn't going to be affected by the capital decisions you're going to make, you're going to make capital decisions that require borrowing.
Right.
You can make those capital decisions later.
Okay.
The reason we include a capital plan alongside a proposed budget for these other funds is just so that you can make informed decisions where you're looking ahead at what's coming down the road.
Thank you for clarifying
I just
that.
wanted to clarify that before.
Sure.
we
Thanks
go.
for clarifying that, and let the record reflect that I'd like to go on the record as saying that I'm fully in support of going forward with the app idea, but I do have concerns about both the parking garage capital expenditure and the Preston lot, which I was just in today, and it's
Which was
quite the
awful.
mess, so.
Yeah.
We
Well, one
have
of the
those other things to pay for.
Yeah, and one of the things that Brandy and I are concerned about, because we talked to each other about this, is the lighting in the transportation center, and whether it can be painted or whatever. So there's a
Yeah.
list
Can
of,
be.
there's a
Like not
list
even
of
fancy.
stuff
Yes.
beyond the meters and the kiosks
Yes.
that we somehow want to keep on a list, and whether it's on the list now or, but it can't be lost.
Here's what I'd like to
Stairs and
suggest to keep it orderly, see if this is going to meet your needs.
Please.
That you adopt this budget tonight for the reasons we've just been discussing, because it's not going to be affected by those other decisions.
Okay.
And then, in order to keep the process by which we will work through those other decisions manageable, that our task for the next meeting be to outline that.
That would be great.
To say, in order to tackle this capital piece, the parking capital piece, in an orderly manner, we recommend that we do it this way, boom, 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 for, a sequence of meetings and different topics on different meetings. You'll then decide whether that looks good to you or not. You'll give us direction about how to proceed, and then we'll be able to proceed step by step through that as we go through the
That
rest of the
sounds
summer.
better. Yep.
That sound good?
Okay.
Does anyone in the public have any comments about the parking discussion? Dora?
Dora Bubalis, Church Place. Just a couple of things. One is, I have Verizon, real dead zone from the Latches to Dunkley's. It's been there for a number of years. I had to move to be able to call EMS when there was a non-responsive person behind Dunkley's a few years ago. So the other thing is that if we're talking about selling people that they can add money by using the Smart app while they're still in whatever place they're going to, many of the buildings downtown, you can't get data. So if they don't have Wi-Fi that you're using, you absolutely cannot get data inside the Latches. Doesn't work, nothing. There's a lot of buildings inside Twice Upon a Time. You can't get, there's a lot of places that are very solid stone buildings that don't get service. So I think that's something to think about when you're talking about using something like an app. Signage. We have terrible signage right now. It's been horrible for years. It's never gotten better. We have a sign that says press the green button, and the green button isn't green anymore. You know, I mean, and people stand there and go, I don't know where the green button is. It's like, it's never been clear. It's extremely inconsistent right now because you have different machines all over the place. You also have machines that aren't good in bad weather and break down all the time. Even though I'm not a big fan of spending large sums of capital and borrowing money, I think it's worth looking at the positives of being consistent. Because when we do 1 meter here and 1 meter there, people get confused, especially visitors, but even locals. I can't tell you the number of times I've been standing in a parking lot and people are just totally confused. But they're like, I could use my card over there. I don't understand it. I can't use it here. So even though it is a big expense, it's definitely worth thinking about. So the last thing. Yes.
Thanks,
All right, thanks.
Thank you, Dora.
Stephanie.
Hello, Stephanie Bonin, Executive Director of Downtown Brattleboro Alliance. One thing is, I wanted to address the signal strength, and maybe Patrick could address it a little bit more, but we did look into it with the company, and the signal that an app needs is far less than what a phone call needs or data needs. Personally, I like to save money, and money is so precious and there's so much to do with it that I do feel a little bit like doing both is like having chicken and ham for dinner. It's not really necessary. The gift that we're being given is to be changing our entire parking system with no money, with no debt. And the interesting thing that we found is that when we talked to these other towns, there wasn't one town that did the app and then went and did the technology. So instead of us thinking about app, credit card, cash, I'd rather we think about it cash or credit card. An app is a vehicle of using a credit card. And it is inclusive because for many, many years, this town has only had cash. And so all we're doing is adding a credit card option. People don't have to use the option, just like they don't have to use the cash option. I also think that it feels often like we're forging into unknown territory, and there are so many towns to look at the examples of what they're doing. Greenfield, Massachusetts, is doing this same app technology. And so I would find comfort in saying that we're not the first, and that let's follow the lead of others that have had success. And I think that's what we're finding, is that the success is in the app, and that we, like you said at the last meeting, are we jumping technology? I think we sort of are jumping technology, and good on us, because we didn't have to do the outlay of cash for the hardware. Also wanted to add that I would love to work with the town, and we also have a parking budget, and so in promotions material, I would love to help promote the program that we decide to do with money as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good food for thought.
Does anyone else in the public have any comments about the parking conversation we're having? All right, so if it makes sense to everybody, we'll vote on if you're ready to, vote on the budget tonight, the operating budget, talk about the capital budget after the staff come back with sort of a layout of everything that we've been talking about. And in addition, continue the conversation on some of the things that are in the,
Shared parking and
Yes.
bicycle parking and
Yes.
so on, yeah.
that have no budget impact.
Right.
Or relatively small budget
A
impact.
small enough one
Yeah.
that, again, I think you could make those decisions as we go along,
Yeah.
not as part of the budget tonight. So what we would intend is to include those things from the report that aren't strictly speaking capital investments, also in the schedule that we'll present to you for next time.
Now, let me ask you a quick question. The ordinances, is it traffic safety that looks over those? Or how do we, if we see something, because, whether you can put 2 motorcycles in a space or whatever, what's the process of getting those if we see something?
So let me make very clear on motorcycles, and then we can talk more broadly.
Brandy's big.
I don't even
Two,
have a motorcycle.
two motorcycles are allowed to park in a space. And
What about 3?
And 3 if they fit. If the 3 motorcycles are within the lines, none of the 3 motorcycles will get a ticket.
Okay.
The circumstance that was referenced at a prior meeting
Right.
by someone who's not expert in the parking system. Patrick supervises our parking enforcement team, and our parking enforcement team has made it really clear to Patrick that there has been a circumstance where 2 bikes have each received a ticket because the meter had expired. So the 2 parked legally in the space, and just like a car, stayed too long, got a ticket. But in this case, there were 2 vehicles there, so there were 2 tickets issued.
You can't just give it to one of them.
Right.
And you can't turn.
So that's the
Why can't you print
circumstance
2
in
for
which
$5?
the two bikes were ticketed.
It's one spot. Why can't they
Two-
have 2 $5 tickets?
You gotta
They're still taking up the spot.
But as long as they're feeding the
Tim,
meter,
that's the best one I've heard yet.
as long as they're feeding the meter by whatever means,
Yeah.
they can get as many in as can fit. And if they're within the lines, they're fine.
Now, if we look,
Back to the bigger
right,
question.
if we look at the ordinance and one of us sees something that's like, that doesn't make sense
Please call
anymore.
it out.
Okay.
We'll be
Okay.
happy. What I would suggest is there's a lot of arcane stuff in there.
Yeah.
There are things, if you remember, one of the things in the conference review that we've identified is we really need to look at all our ordinances, but that's an enormous undertaking. We got to get the arcane stuff and inconsistent stuff out and freshen it up. But right now, we're looking at parking. Take as deep a dive as you individually wish to take. All I ask is that come see Patrick or me first with questions you have about it. It may well be something we've already flagged that's being addressed something in some other manner. If it's something that needs to come back up here for policy consideration, then it'll be part of that discussion later this summer.
And Brandy, when you see the part about tying up your horse, just ignore it.
Cleaning up after your horse.
Or the lantern that you have to have on your carriage after you
I have one more question, or actually it's a request. I have no way of making a competent decision about whether we should investigate a $3,000 in the credit card and the new heads or not. I just don't.
We're not going to do that tonight.
I know. So my request is that if you can find information, get more information about that, just so that, because I thought when I left here last week, I thought, well, we don't need the credit card heads. And then I talked to a few people, I thought about myself, and I used to stick credit cards in there. And then again, Stephanie just said again, well, why bother? And I just have no way to decide.
So we will bring you more relevant information that we can find. To the degree that we can find relevant information beyond what we've already brought you, we will bring you more. I believe at the end of the day, you're collectively going to need to make a decision that's based on your level of comfort. Some of you have articulated tonight reasons why, no matter how fabulous that app is, it won't meet your personal expectation of how we're going to serve the community well.
Right.
And so as a group, you're going to need to see where you fall on, do we do one and then maybe the other at some point, or do we do it all right now? Does all of it mean kiosks too, or does it just mean meters? And we're going to do the best we can to help you through that. But at the end of the day, you may not be 5-0 on each of those votes, but you'll need to just sort that out.
We're going to try.
All right. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the FY19 parking fund budget as presented?
I make a motion to approve the FY19 parking fund budget as presented.
We have a motion to approve the FY19 parking fund budget as presented. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Next up, under new business, is a parade permit for By the People, Brattleboro Goes Forth, which is the 4th of July parade, which happens to take place on July 4th.
Thanks for that added note.
You wouldn't believe how many people call and ask when is the 4th of July parade. It's all
Well, it happens, right?
It's all there. The plans are
Same.
the equivalent to prior years. Minor tweaking from year to year about exactly how we execute the plan, but the plan is to form the parade up at around the high school area, march through town down Canal Street, through Main Street, celebrate America's birthday together. So we recommend, staff recommends to the select board that you approve this permit.
Parade starts at 10 a.m. Then there are carols here. Then events start at the park, and then at 9:30 fireworks. Anyone have any questions about the parade permit before Brattleboro goes forth?
I'll just note that some of the select board up here has committed to being in the parade. Others have not.
Wow.
And some people have been in every single parade.
Oh my God, guys.
And the public is invited. The public is invited to be in the parade too.
Thumbtacks of paint.
And so any questions? About anyone on the
No.
board? Any questions in the public about
John
the?
giving you his car?
John is
I'm
watching us.
I'm
John is
looking into
watching
that.
us right now, so we have to ask him if he'll give us his
His
car.
car?
It's got a nice car.
A convertible.
Yep.
John has a red
Oh.
convertible, so we can ask him
Okay,
right
I didn't
now.
tell me that part.
Would someone like to make a motion to approve the parade permit?
I'll make a motion to approve a parade permit for the By the People Brattleboro Goes Forth Parade on July 4th, 2018.
We have a motion to approve the parade permit for the 4th of July parade. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Next up, we have an update from Groundworks Collaborative, and it's end of season report as well as an update, so please come on the Date Work Jobs program and the donation boxes that we talked about last year, I believe. And if you all would introduce yourselves to the viewing public, that would be much appreciated.
I'm Josh Davis, Executive Director of Groundworks Collaborative.
Ryan Kendrick, Director of Operations with Groundworks Collaborative.
Emily Kornheiser, Director of Workforce Development and Youth Services.
So like you said, we're going to give a brief overview of how the season went at the seasonal overflow shelter, and then we can talk about the jobs program a little bit. So first off, as you recall, we were here in the fall asking for a little bit of extra support. We changed location for the seasonal overflow shelter from the First Baptist Church up to the Winston Prouty campus. We also shifted from a primarily volunteer model, how it operated, to a staff model. And so with both of those changes, as well as the transportation of getting from the drop-in up to campus, it increased the cost considerably for the program. So how did it go? We circulated a report, and so hopefully that's in front of you right now. And Ryan Kendrick did an amazing job putting this report together, as well as her tireless efforts throughout the season of making sure that the program was up and running. So she's going to run you through and touch on some highlights of the report, and then we can open it up for questions.
Sure, so just some basics to point out. One is really interesting that we served within 1% of the same number of people that we served last year. The annual point in time count for the state of Vermont was just released within the past week, which shows that numbers are holding steady in Windham County around the number of folks that are homeless. An interesting trend that's starting to pop up across the country and we're seeing throughout Vermont is that the number of folks who are experiencing chronic homelessness is continuing to increase. So we had a pretty significant increase from last year in our data to this year, which we think fits in with trends, but also fits into the fact that we were able to do a significant better job in our data collection this year. It's a pretty heavy lift to ensure that we complete intakes and paperwork with every single person that comes through our doors, considering that some sign up during the daytime, some come in late at night, and we work hard to be able to have that data to be able to share how the program is running and the things that we face throughout the year or throughout the season, and the things that folks are experiencing when they come to us. Another interesting one that I've gotten a lot of questions about is that the number of people discharging from psychiatric hospital increased this year. Last year, we collected demographic information. We didn't collect for every person that we saw. We had kind of this small group of people that we were missing information for. So it's hard to tell if we're truly seeing more people discharging from hospital, or if that's just that we've done a better job in our data collection this year. We continue to work with providers like the retreat to make sure that any trend that we start to see like that, we are creating solutions around. And we've been doing that work kind of tirelessly each year. And I think that, the only other piece that I wanted to point out is that one of the questions and one of the myths that comes up all the time is that we serve a significant number of people in Brattleboro. We tend to compete in terms of number served with Burlington, which is pretty impressive considering the size differences between our two towns. And so we're trying to make an attempt to collect data about where folks are coming from. It's a constant myth that there is an enormous amount of people who come to Vermont for better services and better resources. We continually find that this is just a myth, and that most people become homeless in the communities that they were born in, raised in, or have significant connections to. They have family or friends here that they've returned to live with. And so we were able to do some of that, and you'll see some numbers that continue to suggest that although that is a myth that comes up frequently, that we are not seeing that as a trend. The majority of people that we serve are Vermonters, and beyond that, the majority are from New England in general. So there isn't an influx of people who are coming in. They truly are people that are our neighbors in our own community that we're serving. If anyone has any questions?
Questions on the report?
Does anyone on the board have any questions? I have one. On the report here.
Yep.
Yeah.
There doesn't, there's no mention, unless I miss it, of children?
Yeah,
Are there kids
absolutely.
that come through?
We
or-
do not. In years past, when we were in the First Baptist Church, we did have kiddos, and we used to kind of have a split of women upstairs, that if they had kids, they would go upstairs with kids and the men would be downstairs. The nature of the work that we do has continued to be really intense, and we've seen significant increases in substance use, and so we no longer have children in this specific shelter because it is low barrier and people are under the influence. And so we work hard to serve those folks in our year-round shelter on Royal Road. And we also work with a variety of partners like Winston Prouty and Youth Services and HCRS. If families are popping up in crisis with kiddos, there are some resources that exist for them. And so we continue to ensure that folks have a place to land.
I might have missed it because I was out for a moment. The difference with the police calls is pretty
Yeah.
striking, and I think it's a really positive development.
Thanks. It's a great point. It's definitely the difference of having a staffed model where we have consistency, we have training provided, we have program meetings that happen regularly, we have supervision of that staff, versus we had an amazing volunteer pool who are extremely dedicated, but the ability to train something to the effect of 55 volunteers to consistently respond to things that are coming up and to ensure that those folks have built rapport with the people that we're serving in the shelter is so incredibly different from having staff on hand to do that.
And just as a follow-up, because if no one's aware, there's been a location change.
Yep.
So I'm wondering how much of that you think might have something to do with that location change, that drop, or if it's mostly the staffing, which you point out.
Yeah.
And then I'll just have a very quick follow-up.
Sure. I think it's mostly contributed to the staff. I think it's a really challenging thing to run an emergency shelter in a way that is safe and respectful. And so the Winston Prouty Center was very different in terms of in the dorm. Once people came in, they were in for the night and they couldn't leave. And that's a hard kind of judgment that we're making for people, that they can't be out in the community, and we don't love that. And at the same time, it certainly decreases the ability for people to go back out and potentially use substances and come back and kind of experience more extreme behaviors. And so that certainly could be a difference of being away from the downtown area.
Because I think the reason I bring it up is I'm definitely an advocate for getting you closer to downtown myself. And it's great to read that Winston Prouty might be considering having you there again.
Yep.
But going forward, that's still the hopes and dreams of of the organization, right?
We're working on a lease for next season. It was actually in the paper yesterday that Winston Prouty's the permanent home. That's not entirely true. We have another season up there while we're working on the permanent solution. And so our goal is to move the program back downtown.
I would say one of the things in terms of being back downtown is that we would still look to potentially have people come in and be in for the night, because we definitely see the benefits of how that suits our needs and the community needs.
Yeah, I'm just thinking transportation issues become.
Yep, absolutely. That piece has been a challenge for sure.
I want to make a comment that I think you guys are doing great work, and I'm hoping that at some point there will be a de-siloing and maybe a connection between the great work that you guys are doing and maybe a connection to merchants and residents and everybody in terms of how we are all coming together around the issue of support for a group of individuals who are a part of our community and not seeing it just as separate Groundworks responsibility. So I still keep hoping and looking forward to maybe more of a collaborative effort to help support the work you're doing. So I just wanted to make that comment and a thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any comments on the report that we just heard? I'm going to ask, do you have anything else to say about the report?
Yeah, just real quick, in terms of, we're here asking for money, and so I feel obligated just to give a little bit of financial information. The budget came in, we estimated it was going to be $200,000, $202,000. That was not in the report, and so this is information that I have. And our actual expenses came in at $197,000, so in essence, we broke even on the program. And so thank you for your help in that. One of the things that does allow for is that we were able to keep the doors open through the end of the season. And I can send follow-up information that details that out a little bit more. Also to point out, just in our community in terms of projects that are going on, a reminder that Great River Terrace is about to open up, which is the Wyndham Windsor project that we're working in collaboration with us and HCRS. And so it is 21 units of housing designed primarily for chronically homeless individuals. And so while this doesn't alleviate what we're seeing and who we're serving in the Overflow shelter, it definitely will help out. And so that is opening soon.
Isn't it like June, what is it, June 22nd?
June 22nd is the ribbon cutting,
Yeah.
and then early July we will start leasing people up.
Yeah, and then for anyone who doesn't know, that's up by Panda North. And the town actually put in the CDBG application on behalf of Wyndham Windsor Housing Trust, so it's great.
Thank you.
Great.
May I ask about the other comment?
Oh, yeah, well, we were just preparing, like, what? Did you say you were asking us for money tonight, or?
Actually, yes.
You threw us for a loop there, because we thought you were saying that, and we're delighted to be your partner on a number of fronts, but we didn't think there was an ask this evening. We thought it was just information.
I said we're here to follow up on an ask. So when we were here in the fall, we asked for money.
Peter's head snapped this way, mine snapped that way. That was already, and we're
Did I tell you this, Peter?
That could all change based on the job.
That's right.
All right. So before we go on to the jobs program and drop boxes, I just want to make sure no one else on the board has any questions about the report. And does anyone in the public have questions? Yeah, Valerie, if you can tell us who you are and where you're from.
Yeah, so is this working?
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, you won't hear yourself amplified. It goes to the TV world.
Oh, yes, right. It works the same way in the legislature.
Yeah.
So I'm State Representative Valerie Stewart, and I came on the parking thing. I missed that. We were in session today, so I will write a letter. I guess that's what I should do with regard to my thoughts
Yes,
on
that
that
would be
issue,
terrific.
because I have very strong issues on making parking easy, so it's more enjoyable for tourists to visit this town.
Yeah.
That has come out in many, many surveys about whether or not to visit Brattleboro. And our merchants depend on people wanting to come here and making it easy. So I applaud you for, making it easy and an app, but whatever we can do to help tourists. Okay,
Yeah.
so
It's a
there's my
long-running-
letter.
It's a long-running discussion, so send us
Okay, I
your
will be
thoughts.
happy to, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
And so the other thing I just wanted to say is everything we can do to support Josh Davis and Groundworks, I strongly support. I offered and got Governor Shumlin to recognize a Poverty Awareness Day during 3 or 4 years when I was first in the legislature. It was at a time when basically I didn't think people were getting it. People are getting poorer and poorer. Shift of income upward. Lester Thoreau, an MIT economist, spoke about this many years ago. Shift of income upward, what have you. So my point is, number one, everything we can do to support the poor and disenfranchised, I am wholeheartedly in favor of. And Josh and Groundworks do an amazing job, and our job is to put people like Josh out of work, people like the Windham County Hunger Council. Sorry, Josh. I know that it's an early retirement, but God, you probably could get an easier gig. But I mean, we just shouldn't be doing this in the United States of America, because this is not. So, you know, the minimum wage bill and all these things that we're working so hard on in the legislature are so important, because no one should be hungry, no one should be homeless, no one should be uneducated or without dentistry, etc., in the United States of America. So I just wanted to say thank you, Josh, thank you, Groundworks, and thank you to all of you for taking up this important issue. And we just got to keep working on it until we don't have this problem in America. And I'll keep it there. Won't get political, I swear. Thanks.
Thanks, we agree. Is there anyone else in the public that has any comments on the report that we just heard? All right, thank you. And now we can move on. And let me give a little context of what you're about to talk about. What was it, a year ago or a year and a half ago? About a year ago. About a year ago, the discussion of panhandling downtown came up. And there was a group that included Groundworks, Groundworks, the town, the select board, the Chamber of Commerce, and the Downtown Brattleboro Alliance that came together. One of the ideas, or two of the ideas that came up, was a jobs program for people that were panhandling, and some kind of drop box so people could put money into a box as opposed to feeling, should I give money to a specific person? And the police department was involved in the discussion too. I can't remember that. I can't forget that, because they've done a really good job. So you're coming here, I think, just to give us a where are we with these ideas.
Yeah, and I'll speak
update.
Specifically to the jobs program. Perhaps you can speak to the kiosks themselves. And so, yes, we looked at low barrier jobs programs. There's lots of examples throughout the country. We keyed in on Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Portland, Maine, to look at a couple of different examples. Groundworks really took the lead to see how we could get this off the ground. The fact that it was going on in other communities, we assumed not that it would necessarily be easy, but that the path would have been forged, and it's something that we could have relatively picked up and run with. And I'm sorry to say that even after a year of working on this, there's not a clear path forward in terms of how do we provide a jobs program that reduces risk and liability for the employer, also for the person who is the employee. And then internally, in terms of what Groundworks is doing, the realization that we just, quite frankly, don't have the capacity to start an initiative like this jobs program. Serendipitously, colleague Emily Kornheiser is here, and Youth Services is really doubling down on their efforts around workforce development. And so we started a conversation. And so I will pass the mic to Emily to talk about next steps with jobs program.
Thanks, Josh. So 2 months ago, I was hired on with Youth Services to start a workforce development department at Youth Services. We have certainly done workforce development as part of our case management, as part of our restorative justice, and as part of our mentoring programs in the past. But to really focus in on this and serve the specific needs of the populations that we work with. And so what that means is really doing workforce development with a relationships first model, and looking at the relationships between our small business owners and the folks that we serve in order to strengthen workforce skills, workplace skills, increase community connections, as you talked about, Shanta, and provide much needed wages and money to folks. And so, perfect timing, we're looking at creating a real spectrum of services, some of them coming in at our high schools through really intensive programming at the high school, sometimes one-on-one case management, that's sort of more traditional workforce development models that we see with the Department of Labor and some other partners. And then really interested in this day labor program because many of the folks in our community might have long-term career aspirations, might not, but need money today, tomorrow, yesterday, next week. So really excited about the option for low barrier employment, sometimes temporary, maybe a gateway to something else, might not be, but don't want to put the pressure on the situation that it has to be a gateway to something, that it's really meeting people's basic needs with dignity and doing that today. So very excited about the initiative, and then started digging into what are the implications of this, why are we doing this, and come up against a few challenges that we need to resolve and are planning to resolve this summer, and doing some more research on this. The few other models that we've looked at have different programmatic goals and different concerns. When we look at the program in the Southwest, there's a lot of undocumented immigrants there who have very different needs with regards to barriers to employment. So they have a very different model than we would use. There's a program in New York that was paying a very low wage and came up against some labor laws. So what's important to us when we look at the options is, one, that we're respecting all of the different agencies that are connected to this and their union membership, and that we're respecting labor and labor's role in this and how labor protects workers, and are really working in partnership with labor as we design these programs, that we're looking at unemployment insurance and liability, and so that this is actually an affordable program to roll out, whether the employer is youth services or whether the employer is whoever we partner with that will be providing these jobs. That we are still within all of those parameters of protecting whoever is working, that we're also having a low barrier to entry. So we're, right? So low barrier to entry means we're not looking for social security cards and all of the huge pile of paperwork that folks need to turn in when you have a long-term job. That makes sense. But then we come up against tax liability, which other communities have solved with keeping sort of a low total number and staying below tax laws, but we don't want to put, that seems like an uncomfortable position to put everyone in, and we'd rather not. So we're really looking for a solution that meets the best needs of the folks that we're serving, both their long-term planning and their short-term financial needs, that we're really working with labor to make sure that everyone's rights are protected and supported, whether that's existing employees of an agency that we're partnering with or the folks that we're serving, and that we're meeting the needs of each of our agencies, and that this is not too expensive to actually get off the ground. So those are all things we're working through this summer and looking at what the incorporation model will be and what the hiring model will be for that, and whether it's sort of an internship model, cash model, whatever it is, and hoping to come back in the fall with a solid plan for you.
Can I ask a question? You keep saying the people who we serve. Do you want to sort of give everybody an idea of who that is? Because I think people hear youth services and don't necessarily think, oh, they're going to help the person on the street who needs a day work.
So the population that youth services serves currently is really across the age spectrum, and we're looking at sort of some long-term visioning work to change our name so that you know that when I say it. But so our youth development program serves youth 18 to 24, which is already people that you don't think of when you think of youth. That's homeless, runaway youth aging out of foster care, folks like that. Our restorative justice programs serve the full range from age 12 all the way up to 100, whatever age. And then we have a clinical program that also serves the full range of ages. And the workforce development programs will as well. So right now in our first iteration, our summer iteration of workforce development, we're just serving our existing clients, but really want to move out into serving anyone in the community that needs that relationship first, low barrier to entry spectrum of workforce development services. And really looking forward to partnering with Groundworks for their case management expertise, their incredible, respectful way of working with our community to really meet everyone's needs.
And just to be clear, this isn't Youth Services is going to take it and Groundworks isn't affiliated with it anymore. It's just figuring out these administrative pieces that are really challenging, and then who's going to operate that and keep it together. We're definitely a partner into it. You know, we've been talking with Steph about it. She's really excited. How do we bring in downtown merchants into this idea? So we're talking about all those elements, and so many partners.
We're really excited about the case management, the human services support from Groundworks, the administrative support from Youth Services, who's really looking at this as a core piece of our work right now. And then when we think about workforce development in Windham County, how are we cooperating with our small businesses to really provide those services? And then, of course, the Department of Labor and other partners who are usually at the table in these things.
And I'm assuming the Brattleboro Police Department would somehow fit into this somewhere, since Gunny or the chief has that task force that goes around, or is that something separate?
That is something separate. There
Well, I know his task force
may
is
well end
separate.
up being some overlap there. There's definitely a role for the town to continue to play in support of what's being developed, and then ultimately, likely, we will be a funder. We don't know exactly what the rest of that's going to look like. And there may be other things that the town will do in direct participation, but we need to give it a little bit more space to be developed into a program that we can then help to support when it comes time to actually launch it.
One consideration that's quite important to us when we think about all of the many considerations that I've talked about, legal and ethical, is when we think about trauma-informed care, choice is incredibly important. So we don't want to be putting people in a position where this is a mandatory program because of any behavior that they engaged in. And so that's going to be really important, how we introduce this to our wider community, how we introduce this to the folks we want to serve, how we talk about it, that this is an optional program for folks who want.
Right. Does anyone on the board have any questions?
It's exciting stuff. I think, you know, the elephant in the room might be paying for it.
Yeah, as usual.
And, but it occurs to me that the discussion that we're moving forward with, excitingly, about hub communities very much feeds into this idea, because
absolutely,
Brattleboro is a hub in many ways, and many positives and many negatives as well. And we're put into a position where funding sources should be looked at in that way as well, as you know, multiple funding sources.
Interestingly, when we've sketched out the various scenarios, money is certainly a major consideration, and the town's support will be very appreciated, but it is not a pie-in-the-sky proposal. It seems very doable.
And I would say one other thing. The other item in this subject matter for tonight is the Dropbox, and the Dropbox is really very secondary to the jobs program because of the importance of the jobs program for all the reasons, in terms of the people who would be served and employed by it, as well as for the broader community benefit that it provides. But the Dropbox was conceived as something that would be helpful to those people who do want to give money in response to the need and the requests that are happening, but feel awkward about giving money directly to a person, or concerned that maybe that money that they're giving directly to a person won't provide them necessarily the best assistance in terms of what they need at this, you know, the point that they're at in their life. And so the Dropbox idea is that there would be a secure box in conspicuous locations downtown where people could put money in the box instead of handing it to an individual. We can move forward with that. The update on the Dropbox is that's a really simple thing, obviously, and we can move forward with that, not in conjunction with the jobs program, since it's going to take a little longer than originally anticipated to get that rolling. I think there's something there to consider. I think it's just not automatic that, well, gee, you know, the boxes are low-hanging fruit, let's put them in as soon as possible. I think that the connectivity of the two and being able to promote the boxes as a way for the community to support in small ways, you know, with $1 here and $5 there, what we're going to be promoting and supporting in a broader official way. I think that connectivity is worth, that we should at least consider keeping that linked. If it's the preference of the board that we not do that, we get the boxes up as soon as possible, then we can get the boxes up as soon as possible. One of the things that gets a little awkward about doing it separately is if it's not in direct support of the jobs program, the question is, what are we going to do when we collect the money? Where does it go? And so is this going to be directly for Groundworks? Is it now going to be for some combination of Groundworks and youth services? That gets awkward. It's not unsolvable, but it's awkward. If it's for the jobs program, it's a clear connection between putting the money in the box and assisting the people who are struggling.
Now, how long, and I know this, you probably don't know the answer to this question, if we're going to wait to put boxes up for another year, that's like a huge amount of time. Because I don't think the jobs program is going to come in the next couple of months.
That's
right. What I would say is that it's very likely that we would want to incorporate something separately as a social enterprise, whether that's an L3C or a different formation, and whatever that is actually might have a cost associated with the incorporation. So I think we could probably spend money fairly quickly. And that the startup phase could come as soon as the fall. Whether that means hiring would happen in the fall, but staffing and certainly staff time would happen as soon as the fall.
Because I would
and
hate
budgets
to see,
would be finished.
Yeah, I would hate to see like a year go by and we still haven't done anything with the boxes, because we've been talking about it for a year. I mean, I get like tying it to something, but it's sort of like, how long do we?
Right. I understand that concern, which is why I'm saying if you want us to move faster, we will, but then what we've got to tie down is what happens with the money.
Right.
So we can be really clear in the messaging when we put the boxes up of where that money's going to go when somebody puts it up.
Is there a way that it gets funneled towards, since we know this is happening, that there's a clear label and signage that says it's funneling towards the jobs program? Or is that problematic?
I would be uncomfortable taking money for something that we haven't
Formally
developed a
set up
budget
yet.
for yet, at least.
Yeah.
And I imagine the town would be uncomfortable giving money to us that we don't have a clear
Can it be
contractual
an
obligation to
escrow
spend.
though? Or in holding? I don't know how that works.
Yeah, or we actually think that it might be useful if we move in the direction of the direct linkage, that it not even be collected by the town. We would buy the boxes and install the boxes, but it would be collected by the people running the program because that's what it's being donated for.
That makes sense.
Anyone on the board have any more questions? I'm going to go to the public.
Just have a comment, and I don't really have it, it's not fully formed. But I just wanted to remind, the way I remember the discussion around the Dropbox was that it would act for those who wanted to give to the issues of panhandling, homelessness, all kinds of things that feed into some downtown issues that we have, in a way that's not a direct give, and you're more assured of an agency that will oversee the funds. So I just wanted to back it up to kind of say it's that giver replacement that we're looking to have an outlet for.
Yes.
So it's a little bit, for me, more of like having them there. This is your alternative to that uncomfortable giving $1. Do I give $1? Do I give 50 cents? For people who are really uncomfortable with that, they could still give. And then we certainly should come up with where the money is going.
Sure.
But that point of contact for many people in our community, I think is...
Or lack of point of contact.
Yes, yeah, because people are concerned that giving $1 to a stranger might go to drugs. So this is something that people have been saying to me over and over again, that they would like an alternative to that, that allows them to give periodically.
Would it be acceptable to the board if we kick this just for 2 weeks, not indefinitely, but allow me to huddle privately with Groundworks and Youth Services around how we might move forward with the box sooner than with the program, and then come back with a recommendation on that specific piece 2 weeks from tonight?
Program
Thank
is
you.
really exciting, thank you. Really exciting, for me for 2 reasons. Really exciting.
Only 2?
Yeah, please, let's do this.
Does anyone in the public have any comments? Sorry. Just reintroduce yourself to the viewing public.
So, State Representative Valerie Stewart, District 1. I've been in the legislature for 8 years, and funnily enough, I worked for Youth Services for 8 years, raising money and doing marketing. So I wholeheartedly applaud this program. I don't know a tremendous amount about it. I recently had lunch with Nancy Leach, who is the development director at Youth Services, who the executive director then and I hired. Nancy is just incredible. I mean, she does phenomenal work. She's so dedicated to this community. So a couple comments. One is, I think this is the first kind of high-level philosophical. At the Windham County Hunger Council, we've talked about the fact that there's a hidden face of poverty amongst us. If your friends aren't poor, you don't really get, unless you read the statistics all the time, that there are many people that are poor, hungry, and homeless. 70% of the children at my children's former school, Academy School, they qualify for, now it's free lunch and free breakfast, which we passed when I was on House Ed, some years ago. I've been on Commerce and Economic Development for 4 years. So point one is, I think we have to elucidate the fact that there are a lot of hungry, poor people here, and we have to put a face on it. And I think that's important. So that's point number one. Point number two is we passed something in the legislature this year, H919, and basically it's a revamp of the Workforce Development Board. What is important about that is, here we're talking, micro, our town, but this is a macro issue that we need to solve as a state. So what I would like to respectfully suggest is that this program be linked with, just a lot of links in a chain, form a full chain and a human chain that ameliorates this problem, because we're very aware on House Commerce and Economic Development. It was actually put under our purview this year in statute, which it never has been before, in words, in law, that we on Commerce and Economic Development are responsible for workforce development. So I think that's a really important and exciting thing. And so I just like to say that, I think BDCC is doing great work. Youth Services, I worked there 8 years. I just have the highest respect for them. I'm so excited. It sounds like such a great program. We just need to, we need to connect the links in the chain. And lastly, without getting too long-winded, I just want to say that there was a guy on Youth Services Board when I was there named Stephen Sayers. And what he did is found a little pot of money at the federal level for restorative justice. And that was super cool, because I think these little trickles of money are, great, but I think, it takes a village to raise a child, and it takes a bank account to solve a problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. Dora. I'm sorry. Yes, Emily.
Yeah. And thank you. I didn't mention this when I was giving the larger presentation, but we're very excited about the potential for this to be scaled up either statewide or nationally. When we looked at the other models, they don't seem to meet the needs that we're meeting. And so, one, to make sort of a splash in Windham County towards the rest of the state, but as well as, really sharing with the rest of the country. And then we have been speaking with folks further up at the Department of Labor, especially the ones interested in apprenticeship programs and some of that.
Great. Thank you. Dora.
Dora Bubelis, Church Place. I'll be brief because it looks like it's getting late. I just have a couple things. One is about the kiosks and the boxes. Yes, I think it does provide an avenue for those people who are uncomfortable giving. It's not going to do anything to stop the panhandling. There's a number of reasons why people panhandle, and some of it is not things that agencies are going to provide for. And I don't think it's going to stop a huge percentage of people from giving to individuals who are panhandling. So I think, yes, it is a good idea. Yes, it is helpful, but it's not necessarily going to have the intended outcome that folks are hoping for, and that is to stop panhandling and stop giving it to people on streets. I love this. I love the potential of what this could be. A while back, maybe even before I was on the select board, but I think it was when I was on the select board, we did take a whole van load of people from the town, including Chief Gene Rinn and Gunny, up to Burlington to learn about the program that Burlington has, which is not a jobs program, but it is a wraparound program that is funded by the downtown program and administered by their version of HCRS, which I can't remember what the name of it is. And it was extremely successful in reducing issues that they had on, particularly downtown Burlington. So I just wanted to throw that out there because I didn't know if anybody was looking at that. It does require an agency, and if youth services, if there's going to be some sort of agency, because the issue was it's mental health issues and there's all sorts of issues, things associated with that, and it had to be a responsible agency administering it, and there was no partner down here to get it started, even if you wanted to try to fund it. So I just want to throw that out there for you guys to explore and look at. It's not about jobs, but it's more of a wraparound sort of dealing with homelessness, mental health issues, negative behaviors that were affecting businesses in the business community.
Thank you. Does anyone else in the public have any comments or questions about the jobs program or the pay box? All right. So I think what's come out of this discussion is that Peter is going to huddle with the 3 people or more over at that table and come back with sort of an idea about the
Specifically
boxes.
the boxes, and then later in the summer, we'll hear more about the program.
Yeah. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Progress is being made. Next up, we're going to have a conversation about energy efficiency matters. 2 things. I think it was during the utility budget discussion, I believe, a couple weeks ago, that we were talking about the energy efficiency projects, and we just thought it would be nice to have an update. Since they're all over the place. And then we want to follow up on the discussion that happened at town meeting about the town's use of renewable energy sources. So I'll throw it over to you, Peter.
Thank you. And I'm going to throw it over to you, Patrick. So, Patrick, Patrick has prepared the 2 reports that are before you, and he's also generally our point person on energy-related matters, although we share those duties as needed. But I think it's appropriate for him to give you the report tonight.
I apologize, Patrick.
For what?
I wasn't overlooking you.
No offense taken. So there's a memo in the backup that was presented to the board, just reminding everybody that a range of energy savings projects were the outcome of the municipal energy audits that were performed back in 2016. They covered a range of facilities, including the municipal center, the library, the Gibson Aiken Center, the Nelson Withington Skating Rink, the Public Works Garage, the Transportation Center, the Pleasant Valley Water Treatment Plant, the retreat wells, and several of the remote pump stations. Also included in the backup was an update of essentially where we're at with those. You can see that it looks to me like a majority, or an approximate majority, of the projects have been funded. Comparatively fewer have been completed, although a number of them are identified as underway. And by underway, we have recently conducted an RFP seeking a construction manager to assist us with implementation of some of these projects. And so we will be coming back to the board in the not too distant future, hopefully with a guaranteed maximum price in order for us to be able to make more immediate progress on the implementation of the energy saving measures at the library, at the transportation center, and at the retreat wells and remote pump stations. That's something we're working on now and hope to begin to make actual concrete progress on that in the not too distant future. And then there have been certain elements of certain projects funded at the municipal center, for example. However, those have been sort of put on hold pending the town's negotiations with the state around occupancy, and the decision whether or not to pursue those is one the board still has on its horizon. Be happy to answer any questions anyone might have as to the status of any of these projects.
So do we, oh, I'm sorry, do you folks have any questions? I didn't mean to jump.
Not initially.
According to the, I'm looking at the 2016 energy audit, that budget thing that goes pending underway,
Yep.
Are we still, we've got budgeted 1.1 million roughly, and we funded 418. Does that mean we need $700,000 to complete, or whatever the math is, to complete all the projects?
I'd say a simple answer to that is yes, but yes with an asterisk.
Okay.
That is that also considered during 2016 energy audits was the value of a transition to wood heat on a location by location basis. The prices that were quoted in the energy audit report itself assumed a subsidy which would be provided by the Wyndham Wood Heat Program. The Wyndham Wood Heat Program is coming to its conclusion at the end of this calendar year. So it is only available to support and underwrite those projects which can be completed by this December. So we think it's going to be a viable option for us at the library, or no, excuse me, at the transportation center. However, if the board wished to continue to pursue a transition to wood heat at the other locations, these projects would cost more than the sum which is identified here.
Okay. And some of these, though, we have in some, the ones that are pending or but haven't been funded or whatever, that funding is somewhere, like we've factored it in somewhere. In some of these budgets,
If
it's not been funded.
If it's not pending, if it's not underway, if it
Okay.
hasn't been funded according to the schedule in front of you,
Yeah.
then the board and town meeting have not approved funding for that project.
Well, that's what, but I mean, it's on those, it's somewhere so that we're keeping track of it somehow, right? That's what I might.
We are tracking it,
Yeah.
but it is, those items that are listed as at this time not funded are also not in the 5-year capital improvement plan.
Okay, that was my,
They
that was
will
my
need
question.
to be incorporated into that plan as additional decisions are made about the different facilities. So for instance, the DPW stands out as an area where we haven't funded any of what's recommended. And the reason we haven't funded any of what's recommended is because we're studying right now what needs to be done at DPW to upgrade a facility that hasn't been upgraded since the 1950s. So there's a lot of work we're going to need to do there, and things like this will be addressed as part of that, rather than installing them now on the old building and then losing the value of that when we have to renovate.
So there's actually a plan. That was basically.
There is a plan and there is a systematic tracking,
Yeah.
but it is, there's not yet a plan for how to fund all of these different pieces. There's a plan for how to make the decisions about them.
Did I'm sorry, I missed basically what you're saying is that the insulating the walls and weather stripping wouldn't be worth the investment because they're going to be such a significant overhaul there at DPW?
Yes, especially the insulating of the walls, given the magnitude of that investment. Right.
So basically what's left other than heat pumps, which we're not ready to make decisions on probably this year or not for a while, are just things like weather stripping and controls and Gibson Aiken Center. That's about it.
Yes, and hopefully we'll be in a position later this year to move one way or another related to this building.
Yeah.
So if it's not going to be a larger scale renovation, then you might choose to move forward with the 2 additional recommendations here. We're still hoping there will be a larger scale renovation.
Great, thank you.
Does anyone else on the board have any questions or comments about where we are with the energy audit?
It might be the cold overtaking me here, but
It's freezing in here.
no, my cold.
Oh,
Sorry.
we're
Being
cold.
here.
We're cold.
But I could have sworn we did the municipal center wood pellet heat project. What am I remembering then?
Windows and roof.
The library.
in the library, you funded the pieces that didn't include the wood pellet heat because the intention for the wood pellet heat for the library and the municipal center is that it be one combined system. So what we've been discussing is the possibility of installing that for the two facilities as part of a municipal center renovation.
Okay, I was confused. I was thinking transportation center.
That one is funded.
That's what
The
I
transportation center
remembered.
is funded, and we're intending on getting it installed.
Sorry about that.
So I have a question. Or Brandy, did you have a question?
I had a question, just, did we decide that wood pellet heat was like our best and most innovative move for heating buildings?
That was,
I can't
that was
remember.
John, well, there was a debate about that, because John argued that it wasn't.
Right.
John did argue that.
Yes.
I mean, I can't
So
remember what
probably
he
wood.
argued pro, coal, or, I'm kidding, John. I was just curious if there was, I'm kidding, John.
Yeah.
I'm just, I don't know, something just feels not that sustainable about it. I don't know.
There was a debate about
About
that.
what?
I don't know. I can't remember where we landed. I guess I would need a refresher.
Yeah.
What, not sustainable, what?
Isn't there something better than wood pellet heat?
Not really. I mean, in Wyndham County, it's, well, Danny, you may want to weigh in, but Wyndham County has like, I don't know how many centuries of reserves that we can use to make pellets. It's
I think,
definitely
just to be
sustainable.
fair to, because somebody mentioned John, I think I remember his argument being that it was a volatile
Right.
price
Price
structure.
That's what it was.
And
Yes.
if you get locked into something, the bottom could drop out of the market for wood pellets. I don't necessarily agree with that. I'm just saying that's his.
That's
that was
what
his
he
I
said.
argument.
still want to know, is there something better?
Possibly, in some settings,
More
heat pumps.
renewable or
but
something
really-
better?
Shanta has a question.
Well, my question is about an overall plan, and tell me if I was wrong in misunderstanding this. That there's no overall plan in place yet for funding all of these.
That's correct.
So there's no long-term looking at all of these and figuring out the strategy.
Right, so there was a audit conducted.
Yep.
All of these were identified as opportunities to
Right.
save energy and
Right.
possibly save money in some cases. And the, so as close as we have to having a plan for energy efficiency, the results of that audit are that plan. But it's not on a schedule, and the way that they've been funded is by year bringing pieces of it into the capital improvement program. So it's systematically, it's not like we received it and put it away in 2016. Systematically, we've been considering which pieces of it we can afford to bite off and move forward with, but there isn't currently a schedule in place for how the currently unfunded pieces will be funded. And in part, that's because of the conversation you just heard, where there's actually been some difference of opinion about whether we actually ought to implement all of these pieces.
So there's still a missing piece in terms of someone taking all the pieces and looking at this and maybe laying out how it fits into a larger plan through phases. Like this is like,
If
this
the
is
board
the.
wants that, yes, but that presumes that the board wants all of the remaining
Got it.
items put into a schedule.
But we would-
haven't received that direction.
Yeah, and we would obviously need more research and more information about that, I mean, before we even got to looking at it in a bigger picture sort of way. This is like just the first step, from what I'm hearing and understanding.
Yes, the audit itself had a lot of information
Yeah,
in it.
right.
We haven't produced a follow-up document that attempts to
Right.
address in detail
Right.
And part of it,
additional
and part
pieces.
of it too is, it's just like when we look at the capital bill, the capital budget, when we're talking about, whether we pave this thing or do we fix the transportation center, a lot of this is not only some of us have disagreements on what we should do, but it's what at the particular moment do we have the money to do. So it's sort of, we're in the same place with the energy audit as we are with, other capital expenses, whether they're a project or it's equipment. So that's part of the problem. If we had like
And it's
millions
also,
of dollars.
it's also a balance between insulation versus
Right.
where you're getting your energy. Should
Right.
you put money into fixing roof insulation before you fix the source of the heat? It's an ongoing argument. And correct me if I'm wrong, it's also a matter of grant funding and obtaining different sources.
To some degree, particularly the wood heat thing was that, but that opportunity is slipping away now because it made sense for us to move forward on the one and have chosen not to move forward on the others. I think Kate's point is really valid. Just to view this particular set of items in a bigger picture, I would suggest, I speak for myself, but I think I speak for this board and the prior boards, that philosophically, we're of a mind to do all of this because it's the right thing for the planet.
Right.
Practically,
Right.
we're still struggling to get to putting in real-time revenues of $1 million a year. We're working our way from below $500,000 a year up to $1 million a year of cash investment into capital each year. We're almost there. I think this next year we might get there. But our real needs, fortunately, we've been able to draw on some fund balance and some other sources to be able to do 1 year over $2 million worth of commitment to capital, and other years, $1.4 million, $1.5 million. So we're making progress in that regard, but we have a needs that well exceed $2 million a year, and no reasonable expectation that we're going to be consistently funding $2 million a year of capital work. So every year we're faced with choosing what can we afford that is less than what we really wish we were doing.
And I think it's also important to keep in mind that it wasn't until 2016 that we had the audits. And previous to that, we did nothing.
Right.
And since then, the staff has come regularly with recommendations by here's the best investment for right now with the money we have. And I think last year it was $98,000 that we put into the skating rink, which is a pretty big chunk. I mean, it's almost well, not a percent, but it's 2/3% of our budget that went into, was invested that way. So it really is, it's been piece by piece, and that's kind of been the strategy.
That's right.
And for things like the wood heat, if we knew what we were going to be doing in this building, then we might have been able to take advantage of the grant program for the modern wood heat systems. And I think the other thing to point out is that the efficiency of the modern wood heat heater boilers at this point is very high, and the availability of the pellets is also high, and I don't think that the value of that is the thing as the fuel source or the heat source to go forward with in the future is going to change. So, but we'll see. There's time left for that. But really, basically, the strategy has been how much can we afford this year? Where's the best place to do it?
Yeah. Does anyone else on the board have any questions, comments? Anyone in the public have any questions and comments just on the energy audit piece that we've been talking about? Daniel, please come up to our microphone. Tell the world who you are.
Thanks, I'm Daniel Quipp. I live here in Brattleboro, and I organise with a group called 350 Brattleboro, which is part of 350 Vermont, which is a climate action group, climate justice group, and certainly interested in this matter. I thought it was kind of interesting, some of the things that you said, the idea of doing the energy efficiency work being right for the planet. Like, it totally is right for the planet. But it's also right for the town's financial responsibility. This is one of the few capital investments that the town can make that will save the town money. It's not going to save the town money a ton instantly, but as long as we plan on these buildings staying upright, the energy efficiency work that you guys do is going to save the town money. So philosophically, this is one of the best things that you can spend money on. And the sooner you do it, the sooner you can actually save that money. So I would strongly urge, bearing in mind what you said about the constraints of capital spending on a year-by-year basis, trying to do as much as possible as quickly as possible, while still paving sidewalks and that kind of thing. And then you also mentioned whether to do the insulation work first before you change the heat source. And my opinion would be that you want to minimize the amount of energy that a building is using before you invest in changing a heat source. I'm a little disappointed to hear that like the wind and wood heat subsidy money is going to disappear and that we won't be able to take advantage of that as much as possible. My opinion about wood heat, and especially the modern wood heat boilers that we're talking about, is that they're basically good. I think I would probably prefer to use the electricity that the solar array is going to generate to power air source heat pumps. I know that like for a residential property, that would be like the most efficient and cheapest way to heat it. For a building this size, I can't claim to like know whether that's the right thing to do, and I trust that the people that made this energy audit made that wood heat recommendation for a good reason. So, and then Michael Bosworth, chair of the Energy Committee, wanted me to find out whether or not the Transportation Centre actual actions would take place this year.
Yes.
Because I know that was voted on, and we were curious about where that stood. And if it takes place this year, then that's eligible for the...
That's correct. Yep. And that's the part that Patrick spoke to earlier, that we expect to be coming back soon with a recommendation to the board of a package of work to get done that will include that work and will capture that discount.
Right. Great. And then I kind of wanted to take this opportunity to bring up something that the voters on March 6th advised you. They advised you that they wanted the town to do its part by protecting town lands from future fossil fuel infrastructure, that they wanted you to weatherize town buildings and schools. They wanted you to install rooftop solar on town and school buildings where it's appropriate to do so. I don't think we even need to do that now. They wanted you to phase out the use of fossil fuels to heat town buildings. They wanted you to create infrastructure to support low carbon forms of transport, including biking and walking. They wanted you to use 100% renewable energy in any new and renovated town buildings. And they wanted you to phase out fossil fuel powered town vehicles and replace them with renewable energy powered town vehicles. And I bring that up now in June because I noticed that it hasn't been part of the conversation that you've had since March. And I was sort of stepping back and letting you come round to it whenever you found the time. And I know that it was mentioned in June or July. And I would really love to see us have a conversation about each one of those points. I think each one of those points is as meaty and substantial about what we do with the homeless in our community, about what we do around racial justice. Those things are super important and deserve a public forum to be talked about. And I would love, each of you to be on the record and say where you stand, so that I know when I'm going to vote next time where I should put my vote. 910 people out of 1,090 voted yes for that resolution. So if you think that your votes matter to get you elected here, then you also have to think that those votes matter in that resolution. So I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. Does anyone else, on the energy audit, do you have a comment on the energy audit? I just want to get through that, and then we're going to move on to the next thing. So any more comments on the energy audit? All right, thank you, and we'll just keep, I know it comes up at budget time too, so we'll be on there. The next thing is a follow-up to the resolution that was voted on at town meeting about town's use of renewables. And Patrick, are you going to do this one too?
Sure. So yes, this is a follow-up to the resolution Mr. Dimes offered at the under other business at representative town meeting this year. And it is calling for the select board to ensure that 100% of the electricity consumed by municipal facilities comes from renewable sources. And what's kind of nice about the way in which this resolution is structured is it identifies Cow Power, which is a program of Green Mountain Power, as one option, but it doesn't limit the select board's choice. It asks for the board to find a way to ensure that our electricity comes from renewable sources. So I'd like to start by just offering a little bit of background on the Cow Power program and move on and talk about a few other issues. Cow Power is a project of Green Mountain Power, and in essence, what you do is for all of the electricity that you purchase from Green Mountain Power across all of your accounts, the cost of that electricity would go up by 4 cents per kilowatt hour. And what Green Mountain Power would do would be to collect that money from you and then turn around and provide it as an additional incentive to mostly farms in central and northern Vermont that are producing electricity in a renewable fashion from a variety of sources. This would serve as a incentive to provide them a higher return and help to underwrite the cost of generating electricity in a renewable fashion. So if you sign up for Cow Power, you are receiving the identical power that you are receiving today. Rather, you're paying more for it in an effort to subsidize certain renewable energy projects elsewhere in the state of Vermont. That's, in a nutshell, what Cow Power does. One thing I wanted to point out before I start talking a little bit about Brattleboro as a consumer of electricity is to talk a little about the standard energy profile provided by Green Mountain Power. In conversations with representatives at Green Mountain Power, they make it abundantly clear that their current standard electric profile, exactly what's coming out of the socket today, is 60% from renewable sources. So it's in and of itself, the power that you receive from Green Mountain Power in your homes or in any of these public institutions is, by virtue of it coming to you via Green Mountain Power, it's 60% renewable just to start with. So then, looking at the town of Brattleboro as a consumer of electricity, the town consumes approximately 2.2 million kilowatt hours of electricity each year. As the board will recall, and the public will hopefully recall, Brattleboro bought in significantly to the solar array, which is coming online this July at the Wyndham Solid Waste Management District. We have identified our 18 largest accounts, and our large accounts are very, very large. These 18 accounts account for approximately 80% of the town's electric consumption. So they're very significant. This is locations like the wastewater treatment plant, for example. And the municipal center is a very large account. So coming in this July, as that solar array comes online, a large percentage of Brattleboro's electric consumption will be coming from a renewable energy source, that being the solar array. It's also kind of important to point out that when you assign an account to a group solar net metering project, such as the district, you don't assign 100% of the electric of that account to the array. You assign about 80%. That ensures that the town never purchases more solar net metering credits than we actually have electric consumption to offset. So there's a little buffer there to provide some security to the town and make sure that we're getting the best bang for our buck. So if the objective is to determine what percentage of our existing electric consumption is derived from renewable sources, we can see on the third page of the memo here that we take the 20% of the solar accounts that is not derived from solar energy, and we add to it the remaining electric accounts which are not assigned to the solar project, and we find ourselves at about 572,602 kilowatts. Now that's approximate. This is based on actuals from a couple of years ago. It's a decent guide. But then when we consider that 60% of Green Mountain Power's standard profile is already renewable, we reduce that number. What remains is about 229,000 kilowatt hours of electricity which is derived from non-renewable sources. or approximately 10% of the electricity that we consume. So, if the select board wished to move forward with cow power or another alternative I'm about to mention, it's important to keep in mind that doing so wouldn't be on an estimate as is shown here, it would be on actuals. So it would become, it would be based on actuals. So if the board was inclined to take advantage of the cow power initiative, adding an additional 4 cents for each kilowatt hour to the non-renewable portion of our electric use would amount to approximately $9,100 annually. That would vary year to year because our electric consumption varies from year to year. The number of accounts we have varies from year to year, but it's in the ballpark of $10,000. Now, the only other thing I'd like to add at this time is cow power is good. It helps to underwrite renewable energy production, but it does so in locations outside of Brattleboro. There are renewable energy projects in Brattleboro, some of which could potentially use our support. One possible example is there is a anaerobic digester project being planned for Old Ferry Road that would generate electricity by virtue of a process of anaerobically digesting biological waste. A project like this is of particular interest to the municipality because an anaerobic digester in this community would help to alleviate consumption of organic capacity at the wastewater treatment plant, which is a concern particularly for dairy and other food processing consumers. So my thought is if the board wanted to move forward with cow power, we could easily set up a certain amount of accounts that would approximate this 10%, and we would move forward that way. Alternatively, we could solicit sort of project descriptions by existing and soon to be online renewable energy projects that are happening right here in Brattleboro that may be worthy of our support, to find out a little bit more about what they're doing and how they're doing it and how they could do it. And if the board wanted to undertake that sort of exploration, we could bring that back to you for your consideration.
Does anyone on the board have any comments or questions?
Yeah, I like that idea because then
Me
if
too.
you if we find out nothing's really viable or it's not going to work or it's going to take forever to get online, then we go with cow power.
I like that too.
You know?
Yeah. And also it gives a chance to hear from the community about some of the things that they're doing in a way that we could possibly help support.
Yeah, and implement it in a really local manner.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of cow power. I signed up for it years ago, and then I found this sort of section that I see that you found as well. It's a little bit strange. If they have this, then they'll move it to this, and if they don't have that, they'll move it to this. I'm just not a huge fan of it. It feels more like an individual homeowner's choice to be able to participate in the program. Great, but when I want to say to my constituents that, I'm really watching where the money's going, it doesn't feel like a real clear direction. So I like that you like this alternative. Can I just ask a really quick clarifying question? You said 80% of the purchase power, sorry, it's my cold again, for town buildings. You sort of referred to the town, but you're talking about town-owned municipal buildings accounts. Okay.
Municipal.
Exactly. Because when you say town, sometimes it sounds like you're talking about every single source of electricity in the town. So
Just the municipal accounts associated with all of our facilities.
Great.
We often find ourselves confusing people that way, so we try to focus on the town as being capital T, town government, and the community being the broader Brattleboro.
Yeah, I assumed it. It's just when you use the phrase, you can't see the capital T.
Yeah. Touche.
Cool, that's all I have to say.
Anyone else on the board have any comments? Anyone in the public have any comments or questions about Cow Power? Yes. Please tell us who you are, or tell the viewers who you are.
Hi, Kit Whalen, Bonnievale Road. I like everything that I'm hearing. I'll be brief. I don't want to be redundant. But you probably remember that I stood right here at this mic and I thanked you several weeks ago for the things that you've already done, in fact, have been doing for quite some time to implement the philosophy of the 350 resolution. I was one of the people who worked hard to get it on the ballot and supported it, and I like everything that I'm hearing tonight. The only thing that I would like to stress is that, although it is redundant, I'm sorry, the voters did want you to do as much as you can, as soon as you can. So I will just pretty much limit it to that. I'm very excited about hearing about the local initiatives. I'm also very excited about Cow Power. I'm sure that there are thousands of people in this community who also are very excited. And yes, I pay my property taxes and I feel pain, but I think we voted for the resolution not just to feel good, but we are actually willing to help. We're willing to help with a little bit of a pinch, if it comes to that, and to help put out the call for people to be involved and give input to your committees. So thank you for your good work. Do as much as you can, as soon as you can. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Does anyone else want to comment? Make a comment?
This one, let's see. Oh, go ahead.
Well, yeah, Kurt.
Hi, seems we're here. Daniel Quick still. Probably still. Yeah, I mean, I think like the buying into the array and the solid waste is like the best thing the town's done in years.
Amazing.
And so, you know, if that gets the town 80% of their electricity from local renewable sources, that's like a huge step towards the 100% goal that we should be aiming for. And, you know, and that's electricity. Like, electricity is kind of like the easy one, right? Like, the hard one is heating and transportation. But let's at least do the easy one, eh? And, you know, and then so like, and Patrick was kind of talking about Green Mountain Power's renewable, about Green Mountain Power's energy mix. And Green Mountain Power's power, in large part, comes from Hydro Quebec. And it's like large-scale hydro. And there are lots of environmentalists who have issues with large-scale hydro because of the way that it has been done. It tends to displace people, it tends to disrupt rivers and communities that rely on those rivers. I guess I would also kind of, I suppose what I'm saying is like I would caution you from believing Green Mountain Power's hype too much. Like, as far as utility companies go, they're like the good one, but that doesn't mean that they're like basically good. They're still a utility company, and they're trying to make as much money as they can whilst, you know, keeping their investments down, but keeping their public profile up and whatever. You know, so when they say, you know, the electricity that you get out of your socket is 60% renewable, I don't think that we're not talking about 60% coming from solar and wind locally in Vermont. We're talking about renewable energy credit purchases, we're talking about large-scale hydro, and we're talking about some small-scale hydro, and a little bit of solar, and an even smaller bit of wind. So if there are like local, I mean the anaerobic digester project is a good one. If there are local projects for you to partner with, I know that Ralph Mimer would certainly have a nice list of solar projects you could get involved with. Then I would recommend it, and I would love to see Chris be able to write a story that you know, Brattleboro's electricity is now 100% renewable. Like that would be like great press for the town. You guys are always wanting to say nice things about the town, capital T and little t. That would be great, right? So let's really aim for that, and you know, let's not drag our feet on it.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I just, for future consideration, as the board considers what Daniel just offered, when the information comes back about the opportunities to invest locally, if you decided that you don't want to factor in the proportion of power that Green Mountain Power says they're bringing to us by renewable sources, and if you felt inclined to be able to demonstrate that the town is consciously purchasing all of its power from renewable sources, the difference between the calculations before you tonight and what that calculation would represent is the difference between a $10,000 contribution and a $25,000 contribution to a local project. So I think we're not talking about the same magnitude as what has been kind of, making it hard for us to do some of the capital improvements. There's a range there you can work with.
Kurt, did you want to say something? And introduce yourself to the viewing audience.
Kurt Dimes, Brattleboro District 2. I think it's also important for the board to keep its eyes on the fact that the resolution is voted in effect twice. It is an implement of the 350 Vermont resolution, which was passed on the 6th. It was endorsed by 350 Vermont, and it got a separate overwhelming vote. So the renewable provision, the renewable advisory, is voted in effect twice, overwhelmingly, by the people of Brattleboro. Also, if we look outside of Brattleboro, with all respect, I think Mr. Moreland's arguments about the renewable sources being outside of Brattleboro is short-sighted. Global warming, energy efficiency are not just Brattleboro issues, they are statewide, national issues which the people in Brattleboro wish to address. So we don't need to be parochial by saying, oh, let's guard this project which we might do in Brattleboro. Those other projects which Patrick mentioned have received no votes as yet, and I'm sure they would if they got a chance. Then one other thing to mention, that hasn't been mentioned yet, the cow power provides income for farmers, and the farmers in Vermont are having a hard time. So it's not just the global warming issue. It's not just the carbon footprint. It's not just Brattleboro's environmental image. It's also the farmers and developing the renewable infrastructure and renewable grid sources. So it's a lot more than just our pocket. But I should mention, with respect to our pocket, when I first researched this issue in 2011, people supported it even if it would cost $12 per person per year more. And the $9,000 figure we're aiming at now is quite a bit less than that. That's, 70 cents per person. It's a lot less. So the public support for this is really very high. I should say, let's go for it. Thank you.
Thanks. Does anyone else in the public have any comments about cow power? David, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I appreciate all that you said and Kit, your comments, and especially that letter that really kind of laid out every single, I didn't know anybody was watching while we were doing all those little things along the way, so I'm very grateful for that. I think, though, we have a lot of people that we have to listen to and a lot of things we have to consider. I don't think there's any question that we want to get as far as we can in this, and we want to do it as cleanly as we can. And I think we're all aware that Hydro-Quebec bought Green Mountain Power, and that I don't know how many tens of thousands of Native Canadians have been Indigenous peoples have been displaced in Quebec. We know all that stuff. But we also know that there's an opportunity here, if it can be done, a viable anaerobic digester project can be implemented, that we can make a significant reduction in the amount of stuff that goes through our waste treatment plant. And basically it's win twice, because there's all that stuff that's not going into the river that's generating electricity instead. And so we're going to look at it much more in a much broader way than we're not just going to move with cow power because we love farms. We're going to look at what's really in the best interest of the town. And I think that we have a unique opportunity here, and hopefully that's going to work out. But we're going to look broadly at it, and we're going to try and make the best investment that's going to be in everybody's interest in the town. So that's my 2 cents.
So I think, unless I'm hearing wrong, people tell me that what we'd like to do is have town staff look into what the projects are in the area that we might be able to invest in, and then come back to us with some suggestions?
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
It does.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, everybody. Thanks. Next up is the grant or award of bid for the Gibson Aiken Center roof. Oh, I'm sorry.
Is it
Oh, no.
time for a final public comment before you move on to the next?
Oh, sure,
agenda item?
sure.
Okay. At Whalen Bonnie Vale Road, I am just curious, because I lack patience, about exactly, specifically what will happen next, and how will people in Brattleboro know what's going on, and when will we have an opportunity to hear about things and share our input?
What we're going to do is what we have just asked town staff to do is get some of these suggestions for some of these programs other than Cow Power, the locally ones. And I guess what we'll have to do is just hear from you folks, how long I don't know if you can answer the question right now, how long it's going to take to investigate those. But once we get that, once we are ready to put it on the agenda, what those projects are, then we're going to continue this discussion.
And our intent is to actually put out a request to the community to
Right.
bring those projects to us. So that will take a little bit of time, but it'll be exactly the kind of community engagement that you're talking about. So we'll announce that we want to know what those projects are so that we can bring a menu of them before the select board with some analysis that shows that if you pick this one, it might be the whole amount that we're looking to do. If you pick, these 3 little ones, it might add up to the amount we're looking to do. There's a decision yet to be made about whether the amount will be about $10,000 a year or about $25,000 a year. So there'll be further policy consideration of it, but the very next step would be for us to ask the community to identify those projects so that we can then do a little analysis around those projects and bring that piece of work to the board.
And what we might want to do, and I don't want to say this date because I don't want people to, but maybe at like the first July meeting, not that we talk about this, but that it's just an update.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So you can just say, here's what we've done. We've told the public about this.
And I'll
You know what I mean?
suggest, not in the interest of slowness, but in the interest just of that first July meeting is July 3rd, and it's likely it's going to be an abbreviated
Yeah.
agenda that night.
Yeah.
So July 17th,
Yeah.
we will either bring that information back or more likely give you an update,
Update.
because I think it's going to take some time for us to cast our net out and then receive that information
Yeah, we
back
wanna
and be
make sure
ready to bring it to
everybody
you.
has a chance to
But
participate.
I
That's
would
right.
hope that those of you who are strongly advocating that we care about this truly and act on it diligently, I hope you're seeing that that's actually exactly how we feel too.
That's right.
People will judge whether or not we've actually hit the mark, but we're shooting for the mark you're asking us to shoot for.
Yeah.
Yep.
And hopefully by July 17th, we'll have a solar array online.
Already operating. That's correct.
Yeah, that's big, I think.
Okay. I do too. All right, so we have a plan. Next up is the recoating of the roof at the Gibson Aiken Center.
Speaking of insulation.
Yeah. I don't know if Carol,
Yeah.
is Carol, or are we just going to?
It's a pretty straightforward item. If you need to hear from Carol, she's here to address it, but we've got a awardable bid below our budgeted amount that will accomplish not only the roofing, but additional insulation in the roof. We recommend approval.
Perfect explanation.
And it's $98,445,000 bid, is that correct?
That is correct.
And it was almost the lowest bid. Okay, somebody want to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion. Oh,
Well, we only want to hear from Carol if we
If you
have any
need to.
questions.
I just felt bad she was here. No, I don't have a question.
She loves us.
all right. So I'd like to make a motion to authorize the town manager to execute a contract with the Melanson Company of Keene, New Hampshire, in the amount of $98,445 for the installation of a new roofing system at the Gibson Aiken Center.
We have a motion to authorize the town manager to execute a contract so we can fix the roof at the Gibson Aiken Center. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries 5-0. I'm sorry, I rushed right that past public participation. I'm looking at Franz, but.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want you to be mad at me. I realized, we just went right for it. Next up is award a bid for tree removal at Horton and Homestead streets.
Equally straightforward. It's the lowest of 4 bids, $21,000 to D&E Tree Company to remove trees that are actually in a dangerous condition on a steep hillside. So there are 28 trees in all. There's actually 4 of those that are on school property of the Canal Street School. So we'll be awarding this contract and supervising the work, and the school will be reimbursing the town for $3,000 worth of this work.
Okay. Does anyone on the board have any questions about this? Does
can
anyone
ask offline.
Does anyone in the public have any questions about this? Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll move to authorize the town manager to execute a contract with D&E Tree Company of Guilford, Vermont in the amount of $21,000 for the Horton Homestead tree removal project.
All right, we have a motion to authorize the town manager to execute a contract to remove the trees on Horton and Homestead Street. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Next up, and we'll stop and explain this one a little bit more, is a grant enhancement request from the Bradley House. They want to get additional funding from the Vermont Community Development Program. I don't know if you want to explain this. And
I'll
Cindy
give
Jerome is here.
4 sentences worth of summary, and if you need more, Cindy's here to represent the owner and the project, and Patrick certainly can take a deeper dive with you into the CDBG program. But the main points here are the Bradley House project is moving along. It was supported by the town and by the state through a prior CDBG application and a substantial grant. The project has encountered some delays, which is causing a financial issue, not a project issue. The project is going to get completed, and it's going to get completed in the next several months. But in the meantime, since it would have otherwise been completed by now, there is revenue that's not coming in for the rooms that are not being rented or occupied. Because it is in the state's best interest and the town's best interest to have Bradley House finish this project and get launched well rather than precariously, we are supporting, the town staff is recommending that the town support this request for a $50,000 supplemental grant. And we've received an indication from the state staff that administers this program that, separate and apart from the competitive program, for competitive applications for new grants and new loans that go through each cycle, that there often is, not always, but often some amount of money that is available for supplemental purposes like this. And there currently is sufficient funding that if the state does agree to provide these monies, it will not jeopardize any other application that the town or anybody else is submitting for the new cycle. So it looks to us like a risk-free right thing to do to provide further support to the project, and we recommend your approval.
Does anyone on the board have any questions for either the town manager or Cindy Jerome?
We're almost there, Cindy. My gosh.
Does anyone in the public want to either comment or ask a question? All right. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to authorize the submission of an enhancement grant request in an amount of $50,000 from the Vermont Community Development Program to support Bradley House.
We have a motion to authorize the submission of an enhancement grant request in the amount of $50,000 on behalf of the Bradley House. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thanks for sticking around, Cindy.
We know it was entertaining.
Yep.
All the way through.
Next up is to approve an application for the police department to get $88,878 worth of funding that would cover the cost of an investigator in the Special Investigations Unit.
This one we did for the first time last year. It's been very successful, providing somebody from our team who is expert in these types of investigations to meet a regional need and be paid for with state money. So it takes that particular salary off our budget for the time being while they're performing these functions. It's not an intent that this be for any particular amount of time. It's certainly not the intent that it be forever, but we do think that it's appropriate to participate in this manner for a second year and to accept the $88,000 for that purpose.
Great. Anyone on the board have any questions, comments? Anyone in the public have any questions or comments? Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the police department's application for an $88,878 special investigations unit / child advocacy center grant from the state of Vermont to cover all costs of assigning a BPD investigator to the SIU to cover cases of child abuse and sexual assault throughout Windham County.
We have a motion to approve the police department's application for an $88,878 special investigations unit child advocacy center grant. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries 4-0. We note that one member is out of the room. Next up is to accept and appropriate grant from the Thomas Thompson Trust for the skate park. This is good news, I guess, Carol. So do you want to fill us in on this?
Sure.
Accept and appropriate. It's always better than apply.
That's right.
In this situation, we're kind of, we're notified of a 11th hour opportunity to apply. So that's why it's at the accept and appropriate stage, because we applied at the 11th hour and we were successful in getting the $15,000 grant, which is really pushing us much closer and almost can touch the end line. With that being said, if this is the appropriate time, I'd like to kind of give you a little update as to where BASIC is at this point. You know that we're in the middle of the $15,000 challenge grant that we received from the Tarrant Foundation. We have just shy of 11,000 of the 15 that's needed. So, we're almost there.
If somebody wants to make a donation, where do they do it?
What they can do is they can do it online. The BASIC has a website, and they can do it through PayPal, or they can send a donation made payable to the town of Brattleboro BASIC. They can send it to the Brattleboro Recreation and Parks Department at P.O. Box 513. And if they don't have a pen or pencil at this time in their hand, they can give the office a call, and they say, how can we do this? Just today, we received a $200 donation by someone just calling and said, how can I do it? And then came in with $200. So I have one ask that is out there right now that I am waiting to hear from. If that ask comes through, we will have crossed the finish line minus that $4,000. So I see the finish line, we're almost touching it, and I believe what we'll be doing is putting the shovel in the ground next spring. With that being said, I'll probably be back sitting at this table at your next meeting to review the bids for the design, which will be opening tomorrow.
Cool. Awesome.
Fantastic.
Anyone on the board have any comments or questions for Carol? Anyone in the public have any comments? Yes.
Franz Reichsman, only representing myself at this point, District 2. I think many viewers and listeners of this meeting would like to know how much of a contribution John Allen has made to the fund thus far.
Well, you're really putting me on the hot seat.
We're putting John on the hot seat, too.
I don't expect an answer.
Right.
Thank you.
I can take you off the hot seat and confirm that I spoke with John just before this meeting and confirm that he did make a sizable donation.
Yeah, John.
I can confirm that as well. Thank you.
He's sticking his tongue out at us and saying things.
We do thank him, that's for sure.
Would anyone like to make a motion so we can get the 15,000?
I move to accept and appropriate a grant in the amount of $15,000 from the Thompson Trust to help pay for the design and construction of a skate park at Living Memorial Park.
We have a motion to accept and appropriate a grant of 15,000 from the Thompson Trust. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Can I just say one extra thing about the Thompson Trust? We very much appreciate their continued support over the years, not just for this project, but many projects throughout the town, not just Rec and Parks, but I know other departments have benefited from that from them as well. So, a big kudos to the Thompson Trust for being able to continue to supporting town functions.
Wonderful, we echo that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is the annual approval of the dog warrant.
Actually, there's one more.
Oh, I'm sorry, I crossed it off already.
Gotta get the library.
I was getting all excited.
Oh, Star would be all
$390. We have a grant. Yeah, it's $390 for the Courier service for interlibrary loan. Anyone have any questions about that?
No.
Anyone in the public have any questions about that? Does somebody want to make a motion?
I move that we accept and appropriate a grant in the amount of $390 from the Vermont Department of Libraries to help pay for the costs associated with the interlibrary loan courier system.
We have a motion to accept and appropriate a grant in the amount of $390. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Next up is the annual dog warrant. We have a list of dogs who have either, is it vaccinated or licensed? Not licensed.
Not been relicensed.
Not been relicensed. Every year, we have to accept the warrant. There is statutory language in this, so basically, even though we might not like it,
Right.
we gotta do it. We're gonna let the town manager talk about this.
Well,
because it's.
just so briefly, what I want to say is, we wouldn't really do this at all, except that we're required to by state statute.
Yeah, it's not our
And the
style. We don't
statutory
like it.
language that we're required to adopt includes reference to destroying humanely animals that are on this list.
So we don't do that.
Under
We would
certain
never do that.
circumstances, and our pledge now and
Okay.
forever is we don't do that.
It's disgusting.
But we have to adopt, you have to adopt the statutory language to empower the police department to be able to actually enforce this provision of our code.
And traditionally, we ask the newest board member to read all of them.
She's not doing it, and I'm not doing
Wait, I
it.
have another question though. I have because I signed it by mistake. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to sign it.
Yeah.
What? Like, one, why do we make it public? And also, there's a line in here about going, like, collecting dogs. Do we do that?
No.
No, so here's the
We
thing.
don't, okay.
Right, so that's the part we don't do. We don't go out and round up dogs and euthanize them. The police department, however, does, when they, opportunistically, they don't go out and actually assign people to this duty, but opportunistically, if we encounter a situation where we're interacting with somebody who's got an unlicensed dog, for the public health protection that a licensed, vaccinated dog represents,
Sure.
we do enforce the statute and the town's provisions. So we're only able to do that if you adopt this warrant that empowers the police to exercise that authority.
So my next question is about the public listing, because, okay.
So the public
yeah.
listing is the identification attached to the action that says these are the animals and owners that are affected by this action.
You don't really read
Again, just compliance with the statute.
I'll give you my personal story. So we've been really super busy, and so our names are about to be on here too. And but it's one of those things where it's just sort of like what it feels shaming. I don't know if I need to know.
So here's what I would say about that is that we had two other practices that were all but identical to this, where we published similar lists of people who were in arrears in various ways with the town. And we've stopped doing that because each of those other two we did on our own initiative related to just a town regulation. So we're with you.
Okay,
We
yep.
and prior boards are with you.
Yeah.
About 2 years ago, we stopped doing that with the ones that we have control over.
Yeah.
This one here, we would not be following the requirements of the statute.
Because it's a state statute.
Unless we adopt it in this manner
Okay.
each year.
Dylan's rules,
No
baby.
problem, yeah.
Sorry.
All right, no.
Now I have to say what I've said for how many years now. Even though you just explained that we don't do any of this bad stuff, it drives me absolutely insane that the individual or entity that is punished is the dog and not the person who
Yes.
didn't license them.
Yes.
And I have to say that every single time,
Yeah.
this drives me absolutely insane.
Yeah. Okay.
So we should wag our finger at the owner.
Nice use of
Yes,
words.
it's the owner who should be punished, not the animal. So anybody else have any comments or questions?
Other than ugh.
Anybody? All right. Would anybody like to make the motion?
No. Let Tim do it. He's lawful good.
It's a short one. I'll make a motion to approve the annual dog warrant as presented.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed?
Aye. Nay. I'm opposed.
Nay.
I don't like it.
Nay.
And
And
I'm-
I signed by mistake, so can I just say?
Motion
cross my
carries
name out?
3-2.
That's right. Taking a stand.
Yep. Okay, next up, we have one committee. Well, we have to vote, one committee that has a contested seat, which is the ADA committee. And we had interviews earlier today with two of the people who have applied for the one-year term that expires in June 2019. So what we need to do is make nominations and then vote. So are there any nominations for the one-year term for the ADA committee? I'm going to nominate Nina Wilson. Are there any other nominations? Someone want to go?
I'll nominate John Komar.
All right, we have two nominations, John Komar and Nina Wilson. Are there any nominations for the one-year term for the ADA committee? We're going to take them in the order that they were nominated. So all those in favor of appointing Nina Wilson, please raise your hand.
Oh yeah, Shanta, welcome to it.
And all those in favor of appointing John Komar? So we have 3 for John, 4 for Nina, if I counted it right. So by a close vote, Nina Wilson is going to be appointed to the one-year term on the ADA committee. Next up, would somebody like to...
There's one that you don't sign.
we have to officially vote on all of the other appointments, so I don't know who would like to go through and either read parts of it or the whole thing?
I'll start it off.
Go, girl.
Okay, I would like to, how do I just?
Yeah, just say you want to nominate the name and then the board.
Okay.
And then the term.
Okay, I would like to, it's not clear on the term for Agricultural Advisory Board. Ashland Bristle, it doesn't say terms. It's not clear.
There are 11 of them open.
So can we just
and
pick?
only one member on the committee.
Okay.
So can we pick the term like ending 2021?
Absolutely can.
Let's do the farthest away so the
Okay.
person is stuck.
So, okay.
And then they can resign if they need to. Yeah, that makes it, yeah.
All right.
That's
I would like to
efficient.
nominate Ashland Bristle to the Agricultural Advisory Board for the 2019 term. I'm going to be nice. For the 2019 term. Anybody in favor for Ashland Bristle?
What we're going to do is read them all, and we're going to
Read
do
them all.
one vote.
Read them till you're tired.
Okay, I'll do it very quick. Okay.
Yeah, until you can't take it
I'll take
anymore.
over
Alright.
at the design
Okay.
review committee.
So,
We just did ADA, so you can skip that one.
Okay, so I would like to nominate Janet Wallenstein, Rebecca Schiller, and Ben Schriefter to the Arts Committee for 2 unexpired terms and 1 3-year term. I'd like to nominate Karen Kell to the 3-year term for the Cemetery Committee. I'd like to nominate Lizette Banger and Beth Baldwin to the Citizen Police Communications Committee for 2-year terms, each of them. I'd like to nominate Tim Duclos to the Conservation Commission for 4-year term. I'd like to nominate Maya Hasegawa, I apologize in advance for butchering your name, to the Design Review Committee, which is a 3-year term. I'd like to nominate Maya
Hasegawa
and John Eric Annis to the Development Review Board for 3-year terms. I'd like to nominate Lee Madden, Wendy Collins, and Scott Banger to the Fence Viewers Committee for 1-year terms. I'd like to nominate Sharon Lake Sr. and E. David Wright to the Honor Roll Committee for 1-year term. I'd like to nominate William Wilson and Jessica Gould for the Recreation and Parks Board for 3-year terms. I'd like to nominate Deborah Miller Chapman for Rescue Inc. trustee for 1-year term. I would like to nominate Mark McColas for the Tree Advisory Committee for a 3-year term. I'd like to nominate Ryan Stratton, Ware of Cole, for a 1-year term. I would continue.
Yeah, keep on going. You're on a roll.
I'd like to nominate Town Manager Peter Elwell for the Collector of Taxes appointed annually. I'd like to nominate Planning Director Rod Francis for Acting Zoning Administrator for the 3-year term. I would like to nominate Animal Control Officer Kathy Burrows for Pound Keeper appointed annually. And lastly, but not least, I would like to nominate Director of Public Works Steve Barrett for Road Commissioner appointed annually.
Great job. Are there any other nominations?
Thank you.
Seeing none, all those in favor of making all the appointments that Shanta just ably read, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All of the appointments have been made by a vote of 5-0. All right, we're done. Would someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to
I'd like
adjourn.
to motion to adjourn.
We have motion to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Nope.
Motion carries.
Wait, we're not supposed to
5-0.
echo you, right? We're not supposed to be backup singers?
Whatever.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, everybody who participated in any way in this meeting.
Oh my God.
Before
You got good
I
stuff.
really use this.